So one random night I decided to try out a little TurboGrafx CD game called Last Alert. I'm not really super into overhead shooters. Sometimes they can be fun, other times they can be too sadistic or have visuals that make me wanna puke. I don't play many of them. Does this one look average to you? Cause it is! It's an average top-down shooter of its time. You know, good old early 90s when shooty shoot, shooting shoot shoot. Every game had shooting and explosions. Last Alert reeks of early 90s Japanese game trying to be American. Just look at it. Even the food explodes. And it's so easy to get hooked in it. There is a leveling system that makes your health healthier and gives you better and better weapons with a limited ammo and the limited continues. So you can retry the same stage forever if you suck. With each level the number of infinite enemy grows and you shoot at them and you see your score grow and you just want to see what the next weapon upgrade will be like so you can shoot more of them at once. It feels so freaking good. Oh my god, it's like I never played an overhead shooter in my life. But let's be real here. If you didn't follow my channel, there's only one reason to search for a video on this game. The amazing voice acting.
I'm the only one remaining of the Force project members. But I have completed the ultimate weapon, Indra. Boy, once it's launched, it will put an end to all mankind. Yeah, they shall be punished. But don't lose heart. I'll give you just one last chance. Unfortunately, it takes 24 hours to launch Indra.
This is the most pathetic sounding villain I have ever seen. Freaking incredible. Every boss battle has its own fantastic one-liner delivered by the hero, Guy Kazama, such as these gems.
Guy Kazama, how dare you kill these precious men whom I've trained?
Well, Colonel, you haven't done a very good job of training them.
Hey, Guy! Let my baby Betty throw you a kiss!
You're some weirdo naming your helicopter.
I'll burn you to death with these flames. How do you want it done, rare or medium?
Sorry, I don't like roast pork.
I bet you think the only reason I tried this game out was because I found out about the cheesy FMVs and atrocious voice acting.
Great.
I know you can do it.
You can never trust Leonard.
And yeah, you're right. Last Alert on Turbo CD. Go play it. The music is good, by the way. Years ago, I played this book 1 and 2 for the TurboGrafx on Nintendo Wii's Virtual Console. I couldn't take the combat seriously at first, but it grew on me, and has one of the best soundtracks in gaming, so I quickly fell in love and wanted more! So a few days ago I played ISP 3 on PC Engine CD. Yeah, I said PC Engine. That's what we call it in Brazil, deal with it! Literally nobody would buy a system called TurboGrafx. That sounds like some random print store downtown. Only Brazilians might find this funny. See that title there? You might be tempted to say it's Wise 3, but it's not. Anyway, this takes place after the events of the first two games, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because this game originally wasn't even supposed to be a sequel. Wise 3? More like Falcon Lies 3. Whatever happened in 1 and 2 doesn't matter. Adol and Doggy are BFFs and they travel together, that's all you need to know. They go visit Doggy's hometown, but there's bad stuff going on involving statues, ancient evil, and a missing Chester. Adol's the ultimate good boy decides to help everyone with all their problems. The game is short and the island takes place is small. The town is like a hub you keep going back to for shopping and letting someone tell you where to go next. It's clearly a side-scroller instead of top-down like the first games, and it's choppy as hell, making people think the console can do scrolling right. Which is funny because this version was made by the company that owns the console. Also, the bump style combo with the first games is gone. Your sword isn't just a decoration anymore, only your shield is. That means I have to push a button to attack, which takes effort, so this game went from an 8 to a 6 out of 10. You can do a downward thrust just like in Adventure of Link, but it's very hard to do it without getting hit. It's also impossible to do perfect dodges consistently, because the hitbox works against you and iframes are for pussies. So if you can't completely avoid damage, how do you make progress? You grind! Grind it like a Diablo player! Okay, not that far, but the bosses are basically level checks. The final boss, for example, was practically a challenge to see if you can kill him before your life reaches 0 first after you use your herb. And trust me, you will use that herb. It takes like 5 hours to beat this game at max level, so it won't grind that long. Can you swing a sword and jump at the same time? Yeah? Then you got this! The levels are just a lot of flat hallways with enemies coming at you with animations that sync perfectly with the music. You think that looks silly? Well, you would be moving like Tenchu if Falcon music was constantly playing in your ears. Not a bad thing because the music kicks serious ass. You know what else kicks ass? The FMVs. Unless the anime look deeply offends you. These are some of the best FMVs of its time. And I'm sure the Japanese voice acting must be great, but as seems to be the PC Engine tradition, the English voice acting is on a league of its own.
I'm sorry, but I'm in a hurry.
After so many years, we finally meet again, and now you've got to run? Adel, I'm going ahead to the inn.
Molten lava is flowing down there. No man has ever returned alive.
The wonders of early city gaming. Truly a blessing to our ears. Do you like riding like I do? Then you like this game and beat it no problem. Also, you're an naughty person.
Goodbye forever.
Sexy Parodius is a game that can probably get you in trouble for showing too much of it on YouTube. Parodius is a series of cute 'em up, as some people call them, horizontal shooters with cute graphics. But this is a Konami series and the gameplay takes from Gradius. Take note of this, because it explains how I feel about it in the end. Now let me get this out of the way. If you're new to shooters, avoid this game. It may look cute and goofy, but this game is not easy. No, if there is a hell, it must look just like this game. A place where you fly and shoot things and get completely lost in the visual pollution of bullets and a bizarre imagery going on and some creepy voice laughs every time you explode to something you didn't see coming. If you need me to explain how these games work, you fly, you avoid getting hit and shoot things, and collect anything that doesn't look deadly. Some of you call them shmups. I don't like the sound of that acronym, so I don't use it. They're one of the purest form of arcade games. Very short but very hard and very punishing. But they are also very pick up and play, and if you get into it, they're nice 30 minutes of mid to hardcore fun. They're punishing because they are short. What makes Parodius stand out really is its presentation, which is intentionally super weird. Bosses can be literally anything, probably nothing you expect, and the humor is very Japanese. This game has some kind of story involving a group of characters trying to make cash by accepting jobs. You can complete stages and still fail your missions though, and that affects what your ending is gonna be. This adds a nice replay value besides just getting a higher score, something rarely seen in shooting games. Graphically, this game looks alright. Very colorful and nothing looks ambiguous, for better or for worse, depending on your sense of humor. Before I played it, I could have sworn this was a Super Nintendo game, because it doesn't look like something that system couldn't handle. Actually, I guess if this was running on this NAS, there would be a lot of slowdown happening, so I take that back. And the audio quality would suffer too. The background doesn't have a lot of detail, but that's very understandable because this game has way too much colorful moving parts filling your screen, trying to kill you. Going back to my comment about this taking after Gradius, Gradius is a classic horizontal shooter from Konami, much like Parodius. The main feature of Gradius is how ship power-ups work. You collect the power-up item. The cursor at the lower corner of the screen highlights a segment. Each segment gives you a different kind of upgrade, and as you pick up more, that cursor cycles to the next segment. That means you can choose what upgrades to prioritize. Things like faster movement speed, double shots, companionships or options that follow you, missiles, etc. By the time you get a few of those, you feel really powerful and it's a lot easier to survive. That mechanic by itself is great, but of all shooting game series, Gradius is right at the bottom for me. Why? Because the moment you die, you lose all your upgrades. Too many sections of the game feel like they were not designed for a ship with no power-ups unless you're a pro. And if you're a pro, you don't need power-ups. Ergo, taking away all your power-ups when you die makes no freaking sense to me. Imagine we're playing a game, any game where you can die. Then you die, and the game goes, "Oh no, you died! You're clearly struggling, so let's make it even harder." At that point, you might as well reset and start over from the beginning of the level, if not of the entire game. So if like me, you hate Gradius, you're not gonna like this game. But let me be fair here and give this game some credit. You have a lot of ships to choose from, each with different shapes and behavior to the upgraded shots. Most ships don't get sent back for dying. Most bosses can actually be defeated with no upgrades, even if you're probably gonna fail the missions if you're that bad. And you have unlimited continues to keep trying the same stage with any ship of your choice. So it's not like this game is unbeatable, you're just not gonna get the satisfaction of completing missions and getting better endings. You can even fail the last stage and get a better ending credits roll. This was the chosen game for Retro Hangover Podcast's review crew community for the month of June, so let's rate this thing. Game Over Hell gives Sexy Parodius for the Sony PlayStation an 8 out of 10. It was clearly not made for beginners, and if you're a shooter veteran, you're getting a lot of content here. Unique, quirky presentation, graphics that aged well, and a mission structure that opens up alternate paths that a lot of shooters lack. But I'm still gonna take away points for the extreme difficulty and still being a branch of the Gradius gameplay. Have a great day. What happens when you cross an anime brand with Castlevania? You get Shaman King, Master of Spirits, on the Game Boy Advance. But I'd rather talk about Record of Lodoss War, Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth. This game probably flew under the radar of a lot of Metroidvania fans. Okay, let me be blunt. I don't like that term. I think it's applied way too broadly to games that are way too different and only have connected 2D maps in common. But I'm gonna use it in this video, just for you. You control Deedlit, a high elf from the spirit world with magic abilities and proficiency with bows and swords, who finds herself suddenly awakening inside a mysterious labyrinth full of people and creatures she met in the past, even some which are supposed to be dead. Why is she here and what does she have to do to escape is something you have to find out for yourself. This is a very short game, so I can't spoil much else. The story seems to take place between the end of the Black Knight novel and right before the beginning of the Crown of the Covenant. So it's an original plot for the game itself, adding a bit of extra development for the High Elf. That's the extent of what I know. I have only ever seen a couple of episodes of a Lodoss War original animation video. I'm not an expert. If you're a fan of the novel series or their anime based on the novels, you already know way more than I do about the franchise. And you will definitely have a better grasp of what's going on with the other characters and their motivations, because this game writes its dialogue under the assumption that the player is well versed in Record of Lodoss War. There's no lore codex explaining to you who the characters are and what any unique terms mean. So yeah, this is a Metroidvania style game. Definitely a lot more Castlevania, Symphony Night in particular. Deedlit's walk cycle looks a lot like Alucard's and the overall aesthetic of the levels look a lot like Dracula's castle. It's alright though, because the pixel art in this game is insanely stunning. I can't believe such a small team was able to work on so many frames of animation and put so much focus on detail for assets and background. Only problem with the graphics is that using magic during boss fights made me lose sight of my position and things I had to avoid very often. And I use magic a lot, cause honestly aiming with a bow in the heat of a boss battle or an enemy pack was a little too clunky for my taste. Exploring the levels can reward you with more magic spells, but the first one you get felt like the most cost effective of them all. You also find power-ups like increased attack power. And don't forget about the power-ups for higher MP and HP. They're incredibly useful, so when you find every single one of them, the boss can kill you with 10 hits instead of 8. The main gimmick that sets this game apart from something like Castlevania Symphony of the Night is its element mechanic. Deed can switch between fire and wind with the press of a button, which changes the attribute of your attacks. This also causes her to become immune to that element and restore MP when struck by it. You need to get used to this mechanic for some of the platforming, especially for the boss battles, because getting the coordination to avoid damage and keep your elemental power fully charged for maximum damage is essential to beat the game. I was not a big fan of this mechanic. I don't have the coordination to deal with moving around, jumping, attacking, paying attention to the enemy's movements, and remembering to switch between elements all at the same time, so bosses were pretty tough. I would have enjoyed the game a lot more without this, but thankfully grinding for levels is always an option if you're struggling. You still need to deal with this mechanic, but leveling up does increase your damage and defense. There's a good variety of weapons, all with different attack range, speed, and a few with special attributes. This applies to the bows too. No armor, so your defense is based on your power level. You can also buy recovery items, but it's really clunky to use them. They share the same shortcut as your magic spells. In the end, I just never use any, which is pretty safe anyway, since if your element is at maximum charge, your HP will recover over time. The music is great. Not as memorable as Castlevania, but definitely still reminded me a lot of the Nintendo DS Castlevanias. Before you ask, no, it was not composed by Michiru Yamane. This mini review is my contribution to the Retro Hangover review crew community. This game won the vote for the Game of August, so I need to rate it. Game Over Hell gives Record of Lodoss War, Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth the final rating of 8 out of 10. Like I said before, it's a very short game. I'm a sicko who likes grinding a lot, and even I didn't clock more than 10 hours. It's not very difficult, we're just trying to reach the end, and I have a hard time imagining anyone who likes Castlevania or Metroidvania games won't enjoy this. But the Ikaruga style mechanic will be hit or miss depending on the player, and the linearity and very small amount of optional upgrades and secret rooms make the experience rather short-lived for what is supposed to be a $25 Metroidvania experience. Thank you for watching. It's the first Atari 2600 mini review in the Game Over Hell. BMX Air Master is a game that came incredibly late for the system in 1989. That's long after the NES and the Master System came out, which means it has the obligation to deliver greatness. The logo might make you think this is going to be a fishing game, but all you get is intense bicycle action. The game features multiple modes and difficulties. Most Atari 2600 games feature multiple modes, but this game actually tells you what they are without needing a manual. You don't even need a manual to understand the controls. Atari games use only one button, which means most of your tricks involve moving the joystick or D-pad around. You rotate to cycle and gain speed, and mid-air you can rotate with up and down, or flip with left or right. I don't have a manual, but it looks like the action button is only used to select a mode and begin a round, which is unusual for the Atari. Doing tricks is very intuitive, and so is adjusting your landing, though I still manage to mess that up sometimes. Regardless of difficulty mode, the game feels pretty much the same, and the 3 stages you select are also the same. Only thing that changes between practice and arcade mode is that one lets you choose the trial and the other has you go through each of them in order. The half-pipe is the worst of the bunch, because you need to turn your bike to keep momentum and the action is delayed for some reason. Sometimes I manage to get a lot of speed. I have no idea how, I just wing it and get lucky, I guess. The half-pipe trial isn't a timer while the other two are very one and done. Just try to raise your score as much as possible with 3 attempts and the game is over. All Atari games are very light on content. It was a different time, but we're talking about the times between 1977 and 1983. This game came out the same year as John Madden Football. It can't have been an easy sell. But this isn't a Sega Genesis game, it's not even an Atari 7800 game, it's a 2600 game. And for that, it deserves some credit because it plays pretty well when you take all that into consideration. And it does something that no sports game from these days can do. Turn your character into radioactive green puddle when you fail. This is Dynamite Headdy, but not the Dynamite Headdy you know. I didn't know this game existed until last week. I wanted to play something on the Master System and Dynamite Headdy is supposed to be a Genesis classic. Castle of Illusion also had a Master System version, which I recommend to any owner of the console or power-based converter. Surely this one could be good too, right? This game came to Brazil in 1995, and the lack of Portuguese translation isn't the most confusing part. No. What's so puzzling about this game is that it was shipped in the first place. Some may argue the Genesis game was way too difficult just for sake of being difficult. Well, the developers of this version took that concept and tried to execute here too, in form of janky level design full of surprise damage you can't see coming. When you die on bosses, it's usually your fault, but dying on the levels always happens because your gigantic hitbox didn't let you dodge something, or the game threw some enemy at you that requires future sight to avoid. This kind of design is so cheap. There is an entire level that exists exclusively to force players to lose lives their first playthrough. Only positive thing I have to say is most bosses are fair, though 2 of them are just the worst. Take this one for example. How was the player supposed to guess these weird tentacles it has would stick at the walls to expose the weak point? Or how about the final boss? You know, a lot of Master System games that are supposed to be hard do this. Beating the games takes half an hour or less if you know what you're doing, but they always toss the ridiculously broken final boss to force you to take longer. This boss reacts with 3 different counterattacks, but they seem to be random, which sucks. Because 2 of the counters can be avoided if you just stand in the corner of the screen, but one of them requires the most perfectly timed jump of your life. None of these attacks are telegraphed, and if you try to move away from the corners, that's already 2 attacks that might randomly hit you. And this boss takes a while to die. Also, you can take enough hits to lose a life first. In one short playthrough, I encountered quite a few bugs that got me stuck in place and taking free hits, which begs the question, how the hell did this game pass testing? Wait, was it tested at all? Will you look at that? For how small the staff that worked on this game is, they sure had a lot of testers. As someone with experience in QA, I have many questions. But this was over 20 years ago and it's come a long way since. Unless you're Bethesda Softworks. Anyway, this isn't a bad game if you have the power of clairvoyance. For normal humans, I suggest staying away. You North Americans did not miss anything here. Have a nice day. For years and years I have dismissed the Darksiders games as generic God of War clones crossed with Devil May Cry and World of Warcraft looking characters. By chance, while watching a friend stream this, I had this feeling that maybe they were actually fun games. Besides, I never played Devil May Cry or God of War, so I was just talking out of my butt. The story has a very B-movie action flick feel to it, and I mean the best way possible. It's not a plot that will make you impressed, but it's not trying to. The world that was built in Darksiders is a lot more interesting than the story itself, and the characters are all well designed. I really dig the art style here. But if I'm being honest, it kind of blends a lot with other fantasy stories I've seen in gaming from Western developers. The same way some of you guys will look at anime games and say they all look the same, stuff like Warcraft, Darksiders, Overwatch, and League of Legends all blend a lot together to me when it comes to character art style. Like everyone is trying to emulate the same one. It's definitely proof of the bias that still exists in the Western gaming community, but oh well. It took me a long time to like the gameplay. I didn't mind the running around, climbing walls, grabbing ledges and jumping from platform to platform, and I liked the Zelda style dungeon item collecting from the start. But the combat was a bit of a barrier. I came to this game expecting a combat that could just brainlessly mash the attack button and make enemies drop dead like that. It's not a hard game, but I was getting my ass kicked anytime more than one large enemy was in the field, or a large enemy was accompanied by a small group of small enemies. I had to take a step back and focus more on taking the combat system for what it was. It's slow paced and it's a lot more focused on staying away from attacks and waiting for your window to do a string of combos, then going back to focusing on evading. Smaller enemies can be dealt with without using your brain, but they still require more spatial awareness than I was expecting. Of course, this is all assuming you're playing apocalyptic or normal and you're not abusing the stun skin ability. You can also activate a short transformation that makes you invincible if you're afraid of being cornered or want to finish an encounter quickly. There aren't a lot of items and 2 of them have no use in battles, but I think they're more than enough to help with the sense of progression. Your weapons level up too, increasing your damage. Learning to like the combat made me change my approach when playing any other game now. So it was a valuable lesson for me as a reviewer and a gamer. Souls you get from enemies are spent on Volgreen Shop, which offers a bunch of upgrades and attack moves. Only problem is, if you're hoping to max everything, it takes a ridiculous amount of souls and not gonna get unless you focus on farming souls for days. For better or for worse, the game is perfectly beatable without spending souls in anything. Compared to games like Bayonetta and Devil May Cry, enemies are a lot more scarce. So you end up spending most of your playtime exploring the world for collectibles and secrets. This is a game you can beat under 10 hours, so it doesn't go crazy with the amount of collectibles. If you're trying to get everything though, you might get very tired of walking around, especially since some of the encounters are a one-time thing. As someone used to far bigger environments, I thought the areas were compact enough that this didn't bother me. Still, you're probably gonna need a guide for a few of the artifacts and chests. Music in this game can be described as harmless. Not intrusive, but I didn't personally care for it much. The voice acting is really good. You have some popular names here like Phil Lamar and Mark Hamill in the cast. As predictable as the narrative is, every voice cutscene was entertaining to watch, thanks to the voice work and the cinematography. Well, on occasion the cutscenes can be paced strangely, but this works in favor of keeping them brief. The story set out to tell doesn't feel incomplete in spite of the fast pace of the narrative. The fact they succeed in that deserves some kudos regardless of how you feel about the plot itself. Although it leaves some questions unanswered since it's just one episode in a bigger saga. The environment design is a double-edged sword. I like how it blends post-apocalyptic scenario with dark fantasy. It's unfortunate that limits what they can do with the vistas, so it's gonna be hit or miss with players. It's definitely a very imperfect game. Its platforming controls me a little too stiff at times, a narrative and presentation that isn't gonna click with everyone, and less fighting than what a hack and slash fan would like. But in the end, I found this a fun little game to burn through. It's the exact kind of neat leader experience I expect from less mainstream, edgy, action-adventure games of the Xbox 360 generation. Gameplay is derivative, but the B-movie plot and world building complement it and turn it to more than some generic experience. And few games manage to replicate some of that Zelda style of dungeon exploration and item usage properly without feeling like a straight ripoff. Something Darksiders is definitely not. Anyway, this one is for the Retro Hangover podcast review crew, and it's time to rate it. Game Over Hell rates Darksiders Warmastered 8 out of 10. This game is often on sale, and if you want an edgy, cheesy flick in video game form you can beat in 2 or 3 days, I don't think you'll be disappointed. Avoid the Steam release if you can. I ran into quite a few bugs that made me reload my save. Get it on PlayStation, Xbox, or Nintendo Switch. I played the original Spyro the Dragon on PlayStation over 15 years ago. I remember having frustrations here and there and still enjoying the game overall. I didn't play any of the sequels and I plan to change that with the remaster, so I recently got started with Reignited Trilogy, which sat on my backlog for years. This marks the first time I regret buying the Switch version of a game. That should tell you how bad it is. Anyway, the game itself tries its best to be a very faithful recreation of the original. Like it's the exact same game with better graphics and animation. If that was their only goal, it mostly succeeds. The story isn't meant to be taken seriously, but the humor is incredibly, for lack of better words,
besides, he is ugly. Ugly?
Cringe. Obviously, you don't go into a game featuring a cute purple talking dragon expecting a mature script. Though I've seen cute looking games aimed for older audiences many times. The thing about this iteration of Spyro in particular is that it has this tone that seems to be targeting kids who watch Paw Patrol or something. You have other kid-friendly franchises like Mario and Kirby out there, but Kirby gets dark or weird very often and Mario goes very minimal with dialogue, specifically to keep older players from getting uncomfortable. At its core, it's a collectathon platformer, but it's a good kind that doesn't ask you to pick up 5 different currencies. To unlock more hub worlds, all you ask is to rescue a minimum amount of dragons, which is really easy to do. All the gems and eggs you collect unlock different things, which are not required to beat the game. Each hub world has around 4 levels to explore, plus a special flight challenge level, and every level is very compact without feeling too small. Well, I guess they will feel small depending on what kind of player you are. I think the size and layout of levels are what makes this game way less draining than the average collectathon. They're designed in such a way that usually by the time you reach the exit, you have most of the collectibles picked up, so you're not getting lost while you're clearing the minimal amount of things. If you're waiting for the 120% completion, then that's another story. Many levels will hide the last batch of collectibles in secret areas or more tricky platforming that's less intuitive to find. These will test your ability to really explore these small levels and your ability to charge and glide. With this possibility, you might spend some time in a level trying to get that last 50 or so gems sounds bad, then this game is not for you. Exploring compact levels to collect things is the entire point of Spyro the Dragon. The platforming and gliding for some of those hidden collectibles can get really annoying though, and I don't like how enemies seem to hit you in like 2 frames of animation. It makes it really hard to judge the reaction time. The gliding, by the way, is my biggest frustration in this whole game. Every time there are platforms that require gliding to reach, the designers really like making the gap exactly far enough that you almost fall off. That way, if your gliding is less than perfect, you're not gonna make it. I hate that so much. When you try out the controls for the first time, gliding shows this potential to make playing as a dragon feel great, but the game never makes good use of that potential. Even Spyro's Fire Breath has a pathetic range compared to how far enemies can hit you and comes with an annoying delay. The calculated distances between the platforms you have to glide make the ability feel simply weak. I'm gonna have to piss off some Spyro fans and make comparisons with Mario here. One of the main reasons even a game as old as Mario 64 feels just better to me is due to the level design compared to Mario's moveset. Take the wall jump for example. There are very few stars that require mastering wall jump, but because of how levels are designed, mastering all of Mario's acrobatic skills gives you a lot of leeway in how to go from one spot to another in his levels. That makes you feel powerful for making use of all the character can do. In Spyro, I don't feel that way at all. It's like they took a dragon character and made the platforming enemies work against it. It's little details like that. I don't care if you're part of the Mario is overrated squad or you grew up in the Sega household of the 90s or whatever. Mario platformers only do so well critically because they try their best to make controlling Mario feel good and that the game stay polished. Well, except Mario Sunshine. That game doesn't deserve its Metacritic score. I found the graphics pleasant to look at and it's still about as colorful as the original. The best improvement was the enemy and character models. Spyro and the other dragons look great. They changed the dragons a lot more than anyone expected, so I guess there may be fans who prefer the original designs. Personally, I like the new ones more. Each dragon looks very unique while staying consistent with the game's style. Though it's a little bizarre how they're all very anthropomorphic while Spyro looks like a regular four-legged dragon. A lot of care was put into giving every dragon you rescue a unique personality, except the older dragons. The old dragons all run with the same joke. It's like, haha, old people are so forgetful and love telling long, boring stories. Spyro fucking hates old people. They rearranged the original tracks and made them dynamic. I don't think the dynamic tracks add much, and the originals still sound better. There are some good tracks, but man, Spyro the Dragon music is weird. Very few of them fit the atmosphere of levels. They all have this ethereal feel to them, and I can't say that doesn't give the game a unique musical identity at least. This is a serviceable platformer with charming aesthetic, levels that don't restrict a welcome scope, and mostly very manageable collectible hunt. I would still recommend despite my complaints about control, gliding and enemies. It's a chill game for not aiming for completion. Do keep in mind I only played the choppy Switch port, which might have dropped some of my input. Welcome to part 2 of the review for Spyro the Dragon Reignited Trilogy. Here we take a look at the second game in the package, Spyro 2 Riptor's Rage. I'm not gonna go over some of the things this shares in common with the first. You should go watch the part 1 review if you haven't. The story this time is Spyro wanted to spend his vacation in Dragon Shores. He blindly jumps into the first portal he sees and ends up in a different world called Avalar. Because the people in there are trying to get rid of a bully called Ripto, and they needed a dragon for the job. The plot here is about as thin as in the first game. They don't really explain why Ripto doesn't like dragons or why that matters. Spyro can't go back to his world without enough orbs to provide power to the portal anyway, so he decides to help. Quite a few changes were done to the design of the hub worlds and levels. Both became less barren. They didn't feel bigger, but if you try for completion, you're definitely gonna spend a little longer in each level compared to Spyro 1. What really impressed me was how the game designed the progression of the main objective in each level. The path and task if you just want to clear the level and get its talisman is short and intuitive. It's basically Super Mario Odyssey, but decades before Mario Odyssey. Unfortunately, the orb requirements for most of the game were so low, this approach misled me into thinking I could just speed clear the story without worrying about completing the other objectives. I got to the door leading to the final boss with 15 orbs. I'm asked for 40 orbs. On the bright side, rushing for the final door had one advantage. I was able to spend the gems I got in the way to unlock Spyro's 3 additional moves. Climbing, swimming, and this head pound move that I think I only needed twice in my entire playthrough. Some orbs and gems can't be reached without unlocking certain abilities first, so this made the job of backtracking to collect 24 more orbs a lot faster than I thought it would be. By the way, the orbs replace dragon statues as the main MacGuffin to unlock portals, while talismans, of which there is 1 per level, are needed to unlock hub worlds. Gems are spent on a British bear who seems to be everywhere exclusively to paywall you. There is an extra currency you get for each enemy you defeat in a level. This currency unlocks access to timed power-ups like Superfly, a long-range, stronger fire breath that can destroy special containers, among other things. Spyro also has a new ability called Hover. With the press of a button at the end of the glide, you can get some extra height and landing control. Honestly, this is a game changer that solves the problems I had with gliding in the first game. As you can see, this sequel adds a lot of meat and feeling to the template set by the first game, so it's no surprise some people consider it the best of the trilogy. I'm definitely not one of those people. The levels do look better and have more life to them. It's very nice that Spyro can do more things like swimming, and having the opportunity to fly in normal levels is great. However, because this game requires 40 out of 64 orbs in order to let you face the final boss, you spend a lot of time doing favors to helpless NPCs. The challenges you're given are very hit or miss. Half of them are simple platforming and exploration, the other half involves tedious chores. A few of them can be incredibly annoying. All in all, they felt like watered down versions of the type of quests you get in a game like Banjo-Kazooie. The first game was more barren and basic, but I'll take barren, basic, straightforward platforming and collectible tracking any day over the execution of the orb hunts. Another reason why I still prefer the first game is the setting. I get that the design of the dragons only became interesting in the remake. In the original they were all generic palette swaps. But I wanted to interact more with the dragon worlds in a post-rescue setting, not be sent to a completely separate setting. Avalar is just very disjointed. I don't know what kind of world they wanted to build with this. You have fawns, naked cheetahs with a bow, scientists, weird humanoid monks, robots, caterpillars warring with birds using rockets, guys in the thick costumes, Eskimos, and whatever this is. At first I thought it was going to be fairy tale themed, but very few levels have anything to do with that. Levels aren't even thematically consistent with the hub worlds they're found at. To top it all, none of the problems you help solve in the levels have anything to do with Ripto, you know, the main antagonist. So I just don't care at all for the setting, which kills some of my investment in the game. I don't know what was going on in Insomniac games at the time, but the impression I get playing Spyro 2 is that someone just really wanted a dragon for a platformer protagonist because they thought dragons were really cool. But then they fell out of interest in the dragon theme. Spyro is still needed a sequel, so here we go, let's just put Spyro with a bunch of random DreamWorks bootleg rejects. If you think having all sorts of little tasks and random challenges in levels makes for a more complete collectathon experience, you're probably gonna like Spyro 2. It's way less janky than the first game, with platforming that's more tight and creative, but personally I can only say I didn't hate the game, but I'm probably never gonna revisit this one again. The busy work approach really outweighs every improvement done for the levels. I said in part 1 you should avoid the Switch version because of the performance, but you really should go with the PC version specifically. The camera in Reignited Trilogy is way too close to Spyro, which makes it easy to lose track of incoming attacks and other things. The camera is absolutely atrocious during the boss fights in Spyro 2, and I can't believe Toys for Bob really didn't think players needed an option to zoom it out, which you can do with modding on PC. See you in part 3. Welcome to part 3 of Game Over Hell's Spyro Reignited Trilogy review. We finally covered the last game of the 3, Spyro 3 Year of the Dragon, aka the best one. That's right, I didn't like the second game very much and I had a lot of reservations about what Spyro felt like in the first, but Spyro 3 surpassed my low expectations by improving on nearly everything, even the narrative. The story this time is that Dragon Eggs get stolen and it's up to Spyro to rescue. Why is he here? No, seriously, why? Anyway, Spyro must go rescue the Dragon Eggs in a faraway land from the clutches of the Sorceress, her army of Rhinorks, and her apprentice Bianca. The new characters are great, the presence of the antagonists are seen in almost every level this time, and the game even has cutscenes to develop the characters and the plot.
Come back when you finish witch school, okay?
You can see the one twist coming from a mile, but this is aimed at very young kids, so no points being taken here. The voice acting is entertaining across the board, and I did get a few chuckles here and there from what NPCs had to say. It's a shame Spyro himself barely talks. I'm pretty sure Bianca and Hunter have way more voiced lines than him. Okay, I need to vent about Hunter. I got this feeling someone in Insomniac had made this Cheetah OC and they wanted him to have his own game. That didn't happen. So instead, they decided to hijack the Spyro sequels with this character, since then really enjoying shoving him down our throats all the freaking time. His friendship with Spyro is really forced. Guy was and still is a dick more often than not. Taking your MacGuffins hostage so you can play his shitty minigames, and if you refuse or lose, he even mocks you. He never helps. Falls for the most obvious trap on Earth and gets more presence in the narrative than the main character. Hunter is the Jar Jar Binks of the series, but actually worse, since he gets the more important interactions with the apprentice. And while Jar Jar gets rewarded with a position in the Senate, Hunter gets the most undeserved happy ending. They really should have called this game Hunter, the Cheetah Prick, featuring Spyro. With his hideous design and awful minigames, he represents all the bad parts of this trilogy. Thankfully, all the other characters are better designed and better written. I've seen some people say the Sorceress is less memorable than Ripto. I think that makes no sense. Ripto barely does anything, he doesn't have any more personality than she does. At least with the Sorceress you can feel her presence across many of the worlds, and the way she affects Bianca's development makes you feel something. She's also just more of a threat, while Ripto felt like a joke.
Out of here, you!
But, won't that kill them?
It doesn't matter, as long as I can still collect their wings!
Spyro 3 takes the good from the design of Spyro 1 and 2 and refines it. Levels are varied and vibrant. You get a more equal proportion of traditional Spyro platforming, experimental gameplay sessions, and minigames. Nothing changed about the Spyro platforming. Some of the power-ups from 2 return, and Spyro has these abilities unlocked from the start. It simply feels better because the levels are more creative and distinct playgrounds, more focused on keeping the player on track. As always, they don't overstay their welcome, still mostly compact in size. The minigames are about as bad as they have always been. Yeah, sorry, I never cared for the approach of filling collectathons with tons of minigames with unconventional controls and unbalanced rules. At least this time it seems there is almost always a way to cheese them. New to Spyro 3 are these sections of the levels where you get to play as a different character. Helping Spyro get some of the eggs, you have Sheila, Sergeant Bird, Bentley, and Agent 9. Their gameplay is highly experimental, so your mileage may vary. I, for one, had a lot of fun playing as these characters. I was pleased by how, aside from Sheila's terrible escort mission and Bentley's whack-a-mole minigame, these sections played just fine. They were a nice break from Spyro's normal gameplay. It took me no time at all to get used to how each character controls. I mentioned in part 2 I had the suspicion Insomniac didn't even want to make Spyro 2 originally. It really makes their dragon and Spyro fatigue even more obvious. The extra characters are clearly the result of them experimenting with gameplay for some other future project. And Agent 9 was probably the main inspiration for how Ratchet and Clank would play. Not to mention how Spyro gets sidelined often in the narrative. All signs were there that they wanted to move on. I also liked their designs and personalities. A huge improvement over the characters from Avalar. Well, Bird is a little cliché, but he doesn't talk much. There are a few exceptions, and one of them are the baby dragons themselves. I get it that 149 is a lot more than the amount of adult dragons you rescued in Spyro 1, but their models and animations are lazily recycled over and over. The baby's design doesn't even match the style of the game. The extra playable characters get sidelined after their respective segments, and that's just fine. Because the boss battles are still ruined by the camera and I would hate to also have to deal with controlling different characters in them. Yeah, that's something Spyro 3 couldn't fix. The camera is still a pain in the ass. The issue is even more in your face when you play as Bentley, because he blocks almost 40% of your view. This is the #1 reason why the Whack-A-Mole minigame gets so infuriating.
They've got themselves all worked up into a tizzy.
If it weren't for the minigames and racing and Jar Jar, I'd be a lot more willing to recommend this game to pretty much anyone. I found the levels very memorable in good ways. The narrative was cute and fun. The characters stick with you more, and I even think the soundtrack might be the best of the three. There is some small fun service for those who played 1 and 2 first, but you don't miss anything important if you skip straight to Spyro 3. But the fact is the minigames are still everywhere and they still drag the experience down the toilet whenever they happen. There's something to be said about sticking to what you do well. I wish Insomniac Games had done just that back then. Spyro 3 was the game chosen by the Retro Hangover review crew, so it's rating time. In spite of how miserable the many minigames are, Spyro 3 Year of the Dragon gets an 8 out of 10. Listen, I got some good news. If you're not trying to get all 149 eggs, you can still beat the game without touching any of the crappy minigames. That leaves you with the best parts of the game, the simple bliss of exploring levels or playing the varied support character segments. I suffered through the minigames so you don't have to. So take my advice, do not go for a completionist run. It's not worth it, the reward isn't even fun. Now if you're enjoying this review, please subscribe and stay tuned, because in the future I'm definitely gonna check out the next game in the Spyro franchise, Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning. I have a full review coming for a more recent release, but since the video was never going to be ready for this week, I decided to pick up another Atari 2600 game. This used to be one of my favorites. It's Keystone Capers. That's caper with a K. I'm not sure what a caper is, but you control what looks like a Bobby running through a department store to chase a runaway thief. This game is a bit like Pitfall with less variety on screen. You have to run, jump or duck to avoid getting hit by all kinds of objects, and choose if you want to use the escalator or elevator to go up a floor. Going up the elevator to reach the same floor as the thief will make him start running to a lower floor, so the secret is to make sure you don't use the elevator too soon. All escalators only go up, only way down is the elevator. But that doesn't stop the thief, oh no. This isn't some common thief. This guy is clearly not an ordinary human. He will simply teleport down or up a floor when he reaches the left or rightmost screen. His psychic abilities are so advanced he can manipulate every loose object in the building to attack you. He can absorb your time, essentially make you age faster through the objects, or even commit murder using the toy airplanes. And if you think I'm just making this up, you can just look at the back of the official box art. Dastardly deeds that defy description. That rogue is hurling everything in reach. Shopping carts, biplanes, beach balls, everything but the cathedral radios. Look out! It's a cathedral radio! The instruction at the back of the box has a lot more content than the game itself. It really doesn't take long for the game to become impossibly hard. The moment the planes start looping every second is when I stop making progress. And jumping starts getting more finicky, but that's just how these games were. You're probably looking at this and thinking, God, those old Atari games are so repetitive, I bet I'd get tired of playing in 10 minutes. And you know, you're not wrong, but the thing a lot of people get wrong is assuming that hasn't always been the case with the 2600 games. There is a misconception that became fairly common in the retro gaming community, that Atari games don't last longer than 5 or 10 minutes a session because they quote-unquote aged. Sure, they aged. They're very rudimentary games that don't have that same lasting appeal a lot of NAS or mid-80s PC games still have. But they were never designed to keep players engaged for a long time. I didn't grow up playing Atari games, this system was already very old by the time I was born, but I enjoy researching useless video game history and people's own stories of what it was like, which you can find plenty of around the internet. I also happen to meet a few older people who remember that time. The Atari 2600 era gaming culture, at least when it comes to game consoles, was all about play sessions that were measured in minutes, not hours. You play the game trying to beat someone's high score, give or take 10 minutes, then you turn the console off and would go play outside or watch TV. Cards were a little over $20 a piece, and changing cards a lot was the only way a play session lasted anywhere close to an hour. Well, that or finding a decent two-player game to play. Paying $10 or more for a game that shows you all it has to offer in less than 30 minutes sounds like a ripoff, but that was just how video games were back then. So next time you see an Atari game being played and you think about how quickly you get bored, just remember, that's how it's always been. It has nothing to do with aging badly. Wait, this game came out in '83. Huh. No wonder people thought video games were a fad. Heretic, made by Raven Software and published by id Software in 1994 for DOS and Mac PCs, is a first-person shooter built using the Doom engine. One glance and you can tell it used the Doom engine. The game is literally dark fantasy Doom. Every magical weapon you get functions like an equivalent from id Software's Golden Child. The story has a really long and convoluted setup described in the manual. It has a nice fantasy-style vocabulary, almost like an excited dungeon master narrating your character's backstory. Either way, just know it's the revenge story, and the episodic plot is also nearly identical to Doom, with the third and final episode ending on a cliffhanger. That's right, just like Doom and Wolfenstein 3D, this game is split into episodes. Like those and many other DOS games, Heretic had a shareware version featuring one episode distributed for free online, with the official registration give you access to 2 other episodes. The version you find available on digital stores like Steam, however, is based on the retail release from 1996, Shadow of the Serpent Riders, which came with 2 bonus episodes. The structure of this game is, you guessed it, just like Doom. Find up to 3 colored keys to open doors, with the last key letting you access the room with the exit. Blast everything that moves with your magic rods, or more often with your crossbow, since that's this game's equivalent to the shotgun. Enemy design and atmosphere go with a spooky, edgy vibe, which makes my pick of Will choosing this game for me a very happy Halloween month coincidence. The gameplay feature that sets this apart from Doom and its clones is the inventory system. Aside from ammo, crystal vials and keys, nothing you pick up is activated automatically. You have to open the inventory menu, select the pickup and use it manually. This can be a double-edged sword. It gives you more tactical freedom, preventing useful power-ups from being wasted too soon, as well as the option to heal yourself, but the whole process of selecting items is a little clunky, putting you in danger every time you open in the middle of a battle. Still, I guess it fits the dark fantasy adventure thematic of the game. The game hints what kind of weapon you could be using for certain enemies by making them drop the appropriate ammo, but really I use the crossbow a lot. It's so powerful it kills the big bosses in way fewer shots compared to the flashier staves. Doom was already themed around demons and hellish scenarios, but Heretic is definitely more dark and moody. Well, I guess it's super colorful for a dark setting. I think I like the atmosphere this more, maybe it's because I played a lot of Hexen. Shame the awful music can really spoil the mood. I have a lot of nostalgia for the aesthetic of the levels, but when it comes to the layout, they can be incredibly confusing to explore and find everything you need or figure out what room you didn't explore. It doesn't get less confusing until the 3rd episode, which features my favorite levels in the game. Probably because it stays away from the castle/town/hell theme, and the simpler maps make it harder to get lost. The bonus episodes are a big jump in difficulty from the original, so I didn't play them. In my experience, this game is a smidge easier than both Doom games, at least if you compare them in standard difficulty. However, the starting levels in episodes 2 and 3 are particularly harder because of the melee weapon. The weapon is so terrible you can't even rely on it to survive against more than one of the standard flying enemies. There's not a lot of enemy variety and you run into these gargoyles all the time. They are the most basic in the game, and still these flying bastards are actually the worst of them. It's easy not to notice them coming and suddenly begin to attack on your back or swarm around you, forcing you to give them attention, since that turns them into literal walls. Then there's the Iron Lich that likes to spam tornado attacks. The only 2 enemies that are truly hard rather than just plain irritating are the Molotovs and the final boss himself. The others are very easy to deal with. In short portions, this game can be fun if you are into boomer shooters, but playing too long will expose how repetitive it is. Unlike the games it was inspired by, Heretic overstays its welcome. Most levels feel like the same thing over and over. A lot of time is spent running in circles trying to find what the last switch you pressed activated, which is just boring. Again, I think episode 3 is the outlier because I enjoyed my time a lot more with that one. Maybe replaying when you already know what to do might be more fun. My current stance is I can replay Doom anytime, but there is something tiring about Heretic that prevents me from feeling the same way. I can recognize sometimes Heretic levels show off neat things neither Doom games had done before, but it's not enough. Episode 1 and 2 could have done with more focused levels. You can play the available versions as they are if you want, but I recommend going with the source port. And don't worry, it's perfectly legal, you still need to buy the game to do that. Look up Chocolate Heretic or GZ Doom, which seem to be the 2 extremes depending on whether you prefer authenticity or modernization. Thanks for watching and have a nice rest of your spooky month. Dragon Quest III came out in 1988 on the Famicom in Japan and received a nice looking and sounding remake for the Super Famicom. the Japanese Super Nintendo in 1996. Being from the end of the line for the console, the game used some great looking special effects in battle, detailed monster animation for attacks, and featured some pretty good field and dungeon graphics. The NES soundtrack was pretty good, but it sounds incredible here. The SNES, or in this case Super Famicom, had a sound chip that always worked well for the game music that emulates strings and symphonic style sounds, which is the exact type of game music the series composer is known for. Combat is standard NES Japanese RPG fare. Your party needs to be recruited in the starting town and you get to choose their names and classes. Every class has a niche, but purely for fighting, I found having at least one spell user to be far too important. And they can learn a lot of spells. Min-maxers will tell you using the class change system well requires you to, I don't know, recruit jesters or something, but if you're not worried about doing the post-game dungeons, none of that matters. And you sure as hell shouldn't be recruiting a dealer for anything except a very specific side quest. Their only function is for extra money and letting you appraise items, which the internet already does for you. I don't agree with the general sentiment turn-based JRPGs are all about grinding, but that is the case with the older Dragon Quest games. Every few dungeons you're gonna want to spend some time gaining some levels. It gets really ridiculous when it's time to fight the final boss. At level 45, I was still running the risk of failing. Be prepared to watch movies while you spend hours leveling. This remake comes with post-game dungeons and 2 new collectibles. Small medals you exchange for rewards and Pachisi tickets. Thankfully, Pachisi has nothing to do with pachinko. It's a board game style minigame where you throw dice to reach the goal and pray you don't run out of rolls or that the game doesn't make you land in a trapdoor space and ends the run. What made me appreciate this game a lot more than I expected was the writing and music. Dragon Quest I and II just made me assume the entire series would be just that, some comfort food JRPG. But if 3 is any indication, it's more than that. It's a very by-the-books adventure at first, but it's also an unexpected rollercoaster ride of emotions with a lot of quirk but getting really dark and tragic at times. The dialogue is simple and straightforward but effective. It reminds me a lot of how Mother 1 and Earthbound handle their dialogue. It knows when to be serious. And if you play the first game before this one, you're gonna appreciate the story on a new level. I can definitely see why the Japanese fanbase is so fond of this Dragon Quest. The newer release of this game is a mobile port that's available on modern consoles like the Nintendo Switch. If you think playing this SNES remake is too much trouble and you'd rather play an inferior, cheap-looking port with less features and no intro sequence, you should definitely go for it. Your other alternative would be waiting for the new HD 2D remake Square Enix is working on. That one may or may not come out next year in Japan. And there is always the original, the NES or the Game Boy Color versions. Whatever the case, if you like what you see, you're gonna like the game. There is a reason Dragon Quest games don't sell that well in the West. Outside of Asia, they appeal to a niche of a niche. Dragon Quest III is a JRPG, a very old school one, and doesn't have the flashy, stylish, cool factor the older Squaresoft games had. If you can enjoy the slow-paced and relaxing, grindy gameplay and don't expect very elaborate dialogue scripts, you're gonna find it fun and heartwarming. Played another Final Fantasy Pixel Remastered, but unlike with Final Fantasy II, I don't have a lot to say about it, so it gets the mini review treatment. Final Fantasy III is the game that introduced the concept of switching jobs for all your characters. You can see the growing pains of this feature before its Final Fantasy V redesign. Jobs are basically accessories you put on and they change your stats and battle commands, as well as what type of weapons and armor you can use. Every job has its own level, going from 1 to 99, and how that affects them depends on the job. Some unlock more moves, others just increase total damage and defense. Spellcasters still need to buy their spells or defeat optional bosses in case of evokers and summoners. When you ignore the job system, this is a very safe sequel that combines design decisions from the first 2 games and goes back to focusing on the idea of 4 blank slates of light chosen by the crystals to save the world. It might not seem like much now, but for 1990 JRPG standards, the plot involving a world ruined by a flood of light triggered by an ancient civilization was really interesting. And it doesn't feature any ridiculous time loop subplot or ghosts of the future past or collective amnesia to be complex. It's cool to revisit these old Squaresoft games and see what they were cooking before they became Square Enix and started enjoying the smell of their own far too much. This game does some weird stuff you don't see in other games for the series, like require using the mini spell to enter some locations and make you jump back and forth between two types of airships. Because of how the job system works, this game also punishes you for using a bad composition now and then. It's like every job has some kind of niche, even if it's something as small as thieves having the ability to unlock doors you need magic keys for, or Dark Knights being the best choice to kill enemies that multiply themselves. I like this. I think it's really boring when jobs are nothing but flavor and the difference between compositions becomes negligible. Why even have different jobs when that's the case? So I found myself liking the job system more than I thought I would, but at the same time it's definitely nowhere near as interesting as mastering different jobs to combine their abilities and traits, like Final Fantasy V, 11 or the Bravely games do it. Combining how jobs work with the Pixel Remaster explosive features like Encounters Off or Auto Battle speeds up the game so much you're going to reach the end in about 11 hours. Final Fantasy III has always been on the short side, but this version cuts down the grind a lot. If you ever feel you're stuck because you're undergeared or underleveled, you can just use the experience and gear boosts and win 4 times the amount and get ready in like 10 minutes. This is supposed to be one of the more popular Final Fantasy classics in Japan, but playing it now, it really feels like incredibly safe and not that memorable adventure in my opinion. So much so I think it would be the last Final Fantasy I'd recommend to anyone. Unless you choose your games by the quality of their soundtrack, because the score in 3 is fantastic and very memorable itself. The Pixel Remaster version of the soundtrack is god tier. No game benefited more from the arrangements than this one. I'd say play this if you want to play every classic Final Fantasy ever, or if you want to witness the growing pains of the job system, or if you just want to see what the final game of the Hiromichi Tanaka game design era was like. If you just want an old school, solid JRPG, you could do worse, but you could certainly do better than the Final Fantasy III Pixel Remaster. Avoid the Steam version for now unless you like using mods. The Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4 versions have more features. Thanks for watching and have a nice day. Did you know the game music composer Yuzo Koshiro had a company that developed video games? For all the pitiful fools who don't know who Yuzo is, he composed the music for the Streets of Rage series, Phantasy Star, Etrian Odyssey, Kid Icarus Uprising, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. In the early 90s, he founded a company with his sister called Ancient Corp, and one of the games they developed was an 8-bit version of Sonic the Hedgehog. This version was supposed to promote the Sega Game Gear handheld, using the new successful brand started with the Mega Drive game Sonic the Hedgehog. The game ended coming out to both Game Gear and Master System, the latter which got the game 10 days earlier in November 8, 1991. The Game Gear version suffers from screen crunch, so the Master System got the superior version. This is also definitely the case for Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but that will be a topic for another mini-review. Just like with Castle of Illusion, Sonic the Hedgehog's 8-bit iteration wasn't designed to be a watered-down port of the original. It's a completely different game. The Master System and the Game Gear both lacked the insane, amazing blast processing speed of the Sega Genesis, so the game needed a different level design to fit the comparatively slower pace. Half the zone share overall themes with the original, but the final zone, the jungle zone, and the bridge zone are all unique to this version. The levels emphasize traditional platforming even more than usual, so don't expect to go fast. Although they occasionally feature ramps and slope shapes that showcase Sonic's ball physics. Unfortunately, the game never does a lot with this in the player's favor. That might sound disappointing, but when you consider most of the original Sonic 1 involved slow-paced platforming anyway, it's really not that bad here. This Master System game isn't out to get you with death traps or enemy placements you can see coming, it's a way more laid-back experience. Personally, I like it better than the original. Chaos Emeralds are hidden in one act of each zone, all you do is find and pick them up. It doesn't feature special stages, instead having bonus levels for scoring extra continues and lives if you clear an act with over 50 rings. Some programming error make it so if you let the amount overflow past 99, the game thinks you didn't collect enough though, so try not to collect more than that. This is a decent 2D platformer that features Sonic rather than being a traditional Sonic game. It's probably one of the best games on the Master System once you stop crying about Sonic not going fast. But look, It's not Sonic's fault the Master System can't handle too many sprites without slowing everything down. Yeah, suffice to say, if the slowdown that happens now and then bothers you, you're not gonna like this game. This is exactly why Sonic's rings don't scatter around the screen when he gets hit, by the way. In spite of this critical change, it's still a very easy game and a very short game you can finish in 40 minutes. I still don't know why so many masters in the games had less playtime than freaking Super Mario Bros. 1, but it was definitely a trend with the console. A little trivia for you, this game was how many fans here in Brazil discovered Sonic due to the console's popularity as a more affordable entry point into video games in the early 90s. Anyway, even with the occasional slowdown, you should definitely play this one. Just try to avoid the version available on Sonic Origins Plus if you care at all about emulation quality. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day! Darksiders II Deathinitive Edition is the second entry of the Darksiders series, packaged with all the DLC of the original, including 3 unlockable extra campaigns. It features a new protagonist, Death, War's brother and one of the 4 horsemen. I know the game is called Darksiders II, but it's not actually a sequel. It takes place during the time War was imprisoned, making it a sidequel? Before you get angry and confused about the title, I just want you to know that Darksiders 3 and Darksiders Genesis both do not take place after the final events of Darksiders 1. That means Darksiders fans have been waiting for the story to move forward for nearly 14 years. Kingdom Hearts fans, you're not alone. The narrative in Darksiders 2 has a big focus on world building. It expands the universe of the franchise to something much bigger than before. While the plot itself is about Death beginning a journey to save War's name and potentially bringing humanity back to life, it's merely a vehicle for the world building and for the development of Death as a character. A lot of names and terms get thrown at you, sometimes faster than you keep up with, but I found it engaging beyond just being a B-action movie flick like described Darksiders 1 story as. The voice acting is top-notch. Unfortunately, the animation during dialogue leaves a little to be desired. Characters use canned animations a lot. The more cinematic presentation is used very sparingly compared to Darksiders 1, which can make it harder to pay attention to the conversation sometimes. By the way, I did review Darksiders Warmastered edition before, so go watch that video on my channel if you haven't. The game starts off strong with very nice looking maps and great vistas. The world is more organically put together, with more things to find and explore beyond the story progression, a healthy and not excessive amount of side quests you can complete, and a lot of dungeons that you can go in and out of very seamlessly. The combat bettered in every way compared to the previous game, with Death being more nimble and enemies being more aggressive, as well as a lot more depth to its equipment system and even skill tree to supplement your preferred playstyle. Traversal is also improved with some Prince of Persia inspired parkour going on that feels great to pull off, and in most of the open map you can ride a horse from the very start of the game. The game is full of potential. It could be the perfect sequel. Then the cracks begin to show, or rather, the crashes begin to show. Oh, come on, you know that was a good... Darksiders 2 is known to have had some of its later development stages rushed, because Visual Games was going under. So I guess they didn't have as much time as they'd like to test this game. In my 19-hour long playthrough, the game crashed 4 times. This is one of the reasons why playing this on PlayStation 5 was a good idea, because with the game autosaving very often, rebooting it and continuing from where I left off takes like 20 seconds. I can't imagine how annoying it would have been on a PC or a slower console. Such is the processing power of the Sony PlayStation 5, only $399 US. The game also cut off all audio for me during a long segment much later in the story and skipped all dialogue from one of the characters there, which sucked because the character happened to be a favorite of mine. So yeah, expect some glitchy behavior happening, even though the game is very much fully playable from start to finish. The parkour I brought up before as a good thing can quickly turn into a frustrating mess when the game puts a timer on it. Luckily, there are only 2 or 3 times when that happens. I think I would have enjoyed this game a lot more if the dungeons were better designed. As I said earlier, there are a lot of dungeons. The story dungeons can get really long, and starting from the halfway point of the game, I found them a chore to navigate through sometimes. The maps don't really show how complex the layouts get or how some puzzles end involving spots that can be pretty spread apart. If you're a puzzle fan, the good news is the puzzles really do require using your brain to solve. It almost feels like I should be liking this game more. I got all achievements the first game. This is supposed to be even better, right? It's just the dungeons drag the experience down, and the entire Kingdom of the Dead portion of the game goes on for way too long. All while every dungeon features the exact same design motif. And honestly, even if I like this game more, some of the optional collectibles are really annoying to keep track of. Ocarina of Time had indicators for when you collected all gold tokens per an area. Why couldn't this game indicate when I had all the dead pages, stone bites, or relics so I could search somewhere else? I'm not saying this is a bad game. If you are into character action with some Prince of Persia parkour and Zelda-style dungeon items with stat building on top, and you only care to finish the main story and maybe the extra campaigns, I think you have fun for 15 to 20 hours of gameplay here. And honestly, Death as a character is more interesting to watch than War was. Thanks for watching. Cheerios! Few indie games share the Kickstarter success story that Shovel Knight had. It's the one that made hundreds of honest, aspiring game teams and scan artists give the platform a go. Some might even call it overrated. But I disagree. Shovel Knight deserves the praise it gets. Nothing over about it, it's rated. This version, Treasure Trove, is the complete version of the game and features 4 different story campaigns. Shovel of Hope is the main original mode where you control Shovel Knight himself, fighting in the order of no quarters to reach the Tower of Fate and defeat the Enchantress. It takes inspiration from a few classic NES games, with the Mega Man, Adventure of Link and DuckTales influences being particularly strong. And it delivers that style of gameplay while being a lot more accessible and less unforgiving than the first few sources. The game looks simple until you try it out. Even though it was designed for modern platforms, the controls are limited to few buttons and that works great most of the time. There is a lot of focus on bouncing with your shovel and collecting treasures, which you use to buy tools and upgrades that help really soften the otherwise hardcore difficulty of the game. Shovel Knight is not an easy game, but it's not super difficult either, unless you let it be. A lot of optional abilities, healing chalices and upgrades exist, and any potential frustration it could have with the game is remedied by the game itself. Losing treasures when you die is too frustrating? You can recover everything if you go back to the spot you died in. And even if you don't recover it, everything you need treasure for only needs to be bought once. So you can find one of the first levels over and over for gems and buy everything you can before attempting a new level. Then losing treasure isn't gonna be a big problem anymore. Most levels will have a blue chest that spawns this Jack Sparrow looking guy who will sell you a new ability. But even this is no biggie because if you can't afford it right away, the ability will be up for sale back in the village. And even if you don't fight him in a level, the ability will be added to the town shop after you clear the level. Far away enemies being annoying? Use a fireball ability you can buy. Having trouble with boss attack patterns? You can buy and stock 2 healing items. The point I'm trying to make is you can have the game be as punishing as you like, but you can also make use of all these resources and tools you spend treasures on to the point you will reach the end credits with enough persistence. It makes Shovel Knight way more flexible than the games it was inspired by. Difficulty of the levels themselves is going to vary a lot. Aside from King's Knight stage being the obvious recommended first level, I never felt like there was a very clear difficulty progression. In fact, one of the few complaints I have is that 2 of the first set of levels in the game are probably the most frustrating in the entire game, and they come back to back, a bit of a rough start. This is one of those games that feature instant death spikes, which, as I've mentioned in my Ori and the Blight Forest review, is a design staple I absolutely hate. Still, it turned out to be a lot less obnoxious than I feared. The level design is more clever than that, with way more variety and hazard mechanics tied to the theme of each level. Definitely very Mega Man inspired, but a little less cruel. The music is one of the best chiptune soundtracks in gaming, period. If you can't find more than 2 tracks you like, then you're not even a real gamer. You should be ashamed and delete all your consoles. Aside from the placement of the hardest levels, my biggest complaint is that you need to press up and the attack button to use an ability. I get it that's how it was done in Castlevania, but for some of the challenges in Shovel Knight, it can be easy to mess up the movement of the D-pad and kill yourself trying to use some of the abilities. The other 3 campaigns add substantial playtime to the short game. King of Cards breaks platforming with sections of card minigames. The card game is unique to this game, but the rules are not complicated. Spectre of Torment has a bit of Ninja Gaiden in it, with wall jumping and a lot of cool moves that give you way more mobility than playing a Shovel Knight. Plague Knight's campaign just sucks. It's the opposite of Spectre of Torment. Even basic platforming becomes clunky as hell, and I'd rather play something like, I don't know, Psycho Fox on Master System than whatever they were trying with this. Anyway, just beating Shovel of Hope can be done in 1 or 2 gaming sections, but between completing every side quest and extra campaigns in mode, Shovel Knight Treasure Trove has enough content to justify its price. And if you'd rather just buy Shovel of Hope, hey, that's totally fine. You're still getting a game that combines all the good aspects of NES era side-scrollers and refines them. This review is my submission to the review crew of the Retro Hangover podcast community, and I have to rate this game. Game Over Hell gives Shovel Knight Treasure Trove the rating of 9 out of 10. Simply put, the only way you cannot enjoy Shovel Knight is if you don't like the games that challenge you, or if you just hate 8-bit style retro games. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Wouldn't the holiday season be much better if every year we had at least one new unironically fun little Christmas themed game to play? But there isn't. Half of them suck and the other half are rush jobs marketed as funny bad. Santa Claus in Trouble is neither. The original is a 2002 game released as a free download by the company Joymania. It was followed by Santa Claus in Trouble again. Sorry, I meant Santa Claus in Trouble. Again! The sequel wasn't free, and Disney Remastered / Compilation Santa Claus in Trouble HD is also not freeware. It features levels from the first and second game, as well as some extra levels. Wow, that's more than 2 games worth, adding to the incredible total playtime of 2 hours! The game is really cheap, so you get what you pay for. I picked this one up because Clint Bassinger, aka LGR, spoke positively about it in his review years ago. I'll try not to repeat his points. The game features 10 controls, but you get used to it really quickly. It's a slow-paced game with focus on searching for presents and reaching the goal while avoiding enemies. Santa Claus can do double jumps, but he can even use his huge bag as a weapon. What a wasted opportunity. Well, I guess the game is easy enough as is. Until it isn't. It looks like you're in for a very tranquil and casual experience, but in the last few episodes, the game starts throwing some seriously Donkey Kong Country no-chill obstacle courses in your way, and expect you to master the secret art of the Center Air Drift to dodge things you can't jump over. As a game targeting little kids, it's not very punishing though. If you lose all lives, you only need to start over the same level you were in. If the timer reaches 0, nothing happens. The presents you get also add to the total score and the amount of lives. If the game is too easy for you, try getting all the presents. Some of them are hidden in really obscure spots. The level design is a little eh. Floating air platforms everywhere, enemies moving in simple patterns, bonfire, and worst of all, birds! Yeah, in true platform fashion, birds are the biggest jerks. If I was a bird, I'd pack every game designer in the world. Except that Zelda team. And the Shining Force team. The levels do start introducing less bare-bone components later, like pistons you can use to make very long jumps, but you're a couple episodes away from finishing at that point. I could fault it for playing way too safe. It's just, as a game you're going to finish in less than 2 hours. If you don't get tired of it in the first 10 minutes, you're going to be fine with it long enough to beat it. I can't go too hard on Santa Claus in Trouble HD. The game cost less than $10 and was put together as a quick holiday-themed thank you by the developers. Taking that into consideration and how I didn't encounter any bugs, I think you could play much worse than this. If you want a really quick Christmas game fix that your 7-year-old kid, nephew, or little brother could also enjoy with no experience playing video games, Santa Claus in Trouble HD might suffice. Thank you for watching and happy holidays! The Tales series is one I have always dismissed as a bunch of bland games released too often by Bandai Namco, but I never actually played the games for longer than a couple hours before. I guess I was judging too much without any real experience. What really got me interested in giving Tales of Phantasia a chance was knowing about how Bandai Namco stated the majority of the Tales Festival visitors were female. A JRPG series with a fanbase that's mostly female? I want to dive deeper into it and try finding out what sets it apart from the rest. Now let me tell you, this first entry is a rough start. The story is nothing groundbreaking, but it's got some twists you wouldn't expect due how by the books it sets off. It begins as a revenge plot, and I suppose you do enact that revenge in the end. Like most JRPGs, you slowly realize the villain you want to defeat is also a threat to the whole world, which you end up saving. Without spoiling anything, you might end up not feeling the way you might think by the time you reach the end credits. It also involves time travel, and take my word for it, don't think too much about the logic of time travel theory or the whole narrative falls apart. Thankfully, the characters are mostly likable and the humor is still pretty good. Sadly, this version of the game was never officially localized, which puts you at the mercy of the fan translation stream's own inserted jokes sometimes. The problem is the gameplay. I can't even say it's simply aged. Compared to other JRPGs that were already out, it already has a hefty share of clunkiness. Combined with a lot of long labyrinthine dungeons and no way to instantly return to the entrance, it makes for some hair-pulling experience. Seriously, how is it that games from the NES and Master System era got this right that later games completely overlook? Include some freaking item spell to exit dungeons. Without them, I feel like I have to grind in advance to look up maps online so I don't run the risk of running out of the resources before I finish the dungeon. And then there's the battle system. Boy howdy did it take me a while to sort of get it. See, your first instinct when noticing your control class and slashing enemies with the press of a button is to treat it like an average action RPG, where you want to hack and slash while the AI handles the rest of the party. Turns out that's not how you play the game. That's bad because it's really not intuitive at all, but that's also good because there is more depth to it than just mashing buttons. I'm by no means a Tales of Phantasia expert, but the way that has worked for me is to put it like this. Class is the tank, Min is the healer, everyone else is a DPS. Yeah, just like the trifecta of online RPGs. You want to make sure the class is the only one being directly attacked, and use his arts, as the melee skills are called, to not only damage enemies but keep them away from the rest of the party and interrupt their casts. Often you should manually order characters to cast spells, especially Min since she can be a bit of a slow AI to react. Now on paper this is fine, I even like it. It would have been way better if some arts didn't randomly mess up class positioning. And yeah, I'm aware of the manual mode, the problem is what the art animation does, which you cannot avoid with the manual control. I'm definitely not a fan of how all of this gets executed in Phantasia. Basically, either you keep full control of the flow of battle, or you leave so much as a small gap for the boss to react and your party gets completely destroyed in one or two casts of the enemy. In normal encounters, more often than not, just mashing buttons with class works, which makes a lot of those encounters boring and very undesirable thanks to the high encounter rate. So many fights want just cornering an enemy and mashing or spamming arts until their unreasonably high HP depletes. And most magic spells will pause everything to play their animations. I got used to this, but it still felt unnecessary. Music was done by two composers, one being Motoi Sakuraba, who has gotten a bit of a negative reputation in some circles. The music in Phantasia ranges from decent to good, I can say that much. Some tracks should stick with you outside of the game. A lot of what the game does is pretty good. Music, graphics, writing. It's the main loop of battle and dungeons that I really didn't enjoy that much. It's making me want to skip Tales of Destiny and Eternia so I can avoid more of the gameplay wart. If, like me, you're curious to try the Tales series, I say skip this one. Mind you, this PlayStation version of the game is considered the best port, so definitely don't go for the SNES or GBI releases if you must. Thanks for watching and take care! Picture this. The year is 1990. You're like 8 or 9 years old. It's almost Christmas and you want to ask your parents for a present. Remembering the fun you had playing The Legend of Zelda in your friend's house, you ask your parents for an NES and a Zelda Nintendo tape. Your parents are not gonna buy you another console, you only had your TurboGrafx 16 for less than a year, so of course they say no. We have Zelda at home, your dad says. you're looking at Zelda at home. And your dad was Johnny Turbo. Neutopia is, as you could tell 5 seconds for the start of the video, a clone of the first Zelda game. A rather shameless clone, but not any more blatant than Sega's own Golden Axe Warrior was. The Legend of Zelda was a big success, so nothing wrong with trying to take that formula and try improving on it, right? In Neutopia, you control Jazida, a warrior who is brave and must recover 8 medallions and rescue the princess from the evil Death. In case you're worried you might forget Jazida is brave, don't worry, the game will remind you constantly. Like in Legend of Zelda, you have an overworld with caves to be found and NPCs giving you clues and dungeons to enter. Instead of a single overworld with all dungeons in it, the game is split into 4 maps, each with 2 dungeons, and you have no choice but to clear them in order. It's close to a level by level progression instead of semi-open-ended like Zelda was. The first map, or sphere as they're called, is about as open as Hyrule, but the other maps become less so and get more and more complex with the layout. I dare say the third and fourth spheres go too far with that and become just obnoxious to navigate. Neutopia goes harder than Zelda with enemy amount and how many enemies move diagonally and shoot projectiles at you. This leads to the combat being a little more frustrating. Even with an item that makes me move faster, Jazida doesn't get agile enough to make things easier. No matter how many upgrades you get, your sword is the size of a toothpick and will often miss enemies by half a tile. That's why instead you should rely on the Fire Wand you pick up later to eliminate enemies from much further away. The Fire Wand is stronger and covers a longer range the closer you are to max health. It works great for dealing with large amount of enemies you encounter within dungeon rooms, but for bosses you're still better off using a sword. The dungeons themselves work pretty much exactly like in Zelda. There are hidden passages you need to blow up to go to certain rooms or create shortcuts, lots of puzzles that involve finding the right block to push to open doors or being trapped until you eliminate all enemies. Compared to Zelda, there are 2 original additions: trap tiles that trigger arrows that get shot from holes in the walls, and random brown bricks that stab you when you get close enough. Naturally, there are blocks everywhere, so this trap really cheapens the experience. Nothing like losing health because of a trap you can't see coming. The bosses start off incredibly easy, then become really challenging in the last 4 labyrinths. Overall, when it comes to combat, you have to be really good at the game to avoid damage, so you will constantly want to collect or buy health potions. Most items are found outside the dungeons. The treasures you find deep inside the labyrinths themselves are usually upgrades for your armor to reduce damage, to your shield to block stronger projectiles, and to your sword for more damage. Unlike Zelda, your options for dealing with enemies is limited to your sword, your wand, and maybe bombs. You're better off saving those to open stuff up. Neutopia feels almost like a third quest for the NES Legend of Zelda, but I found the combat design and overworld maps quite worse even with a much less cryptic approach. Still not a bad game by any means if you like OG Zelda clones. It's a very short title you can beat one sitting if you have a free Saturday or Sunday to play some ancient PC Engine game. Thank you for watching. I'm a huge fan of the Castlevania series. The game series to be specific. It's the only series I consider to be consistently good. The worst Castlevania games are still going to be at least decent. I can't say the same even for series like Mario Platformers, Final Fantasy or Legend of Zelda. Super Castlevania IV is particularly high in the franchise tier list. This game was covered 1,000 times in classic game content, but as an active participant in Retro Hangover podcast review crew, I have to make at least a mini review covering it this month. Failing to comply is met with punishment by hosting a 48-hour Drakengard NDE stream marathon while the community spams the chat with slander against the Xenoblade games. It's cruel, but it's the rules. If you're not familiar with the classic Castlevania games, they are traditional level-by-level side-scrolling action games where you control a member of the Belmont family line, who always answer the call to slay Lord Dracula every time he resurrects to curse Transylvania with his horde of demons. Their main weapon is the Vampire Killer, a whip that gets stronger with each power-up you pick up, getting the full power with 2 pickups. Normally your attack range is limited to what's in front of you, but Simon Belmont in Super Castlevania IV discovered what the word angle means and decided to use this forbidden art to whip in different directions. You keep moving forward while you're dealing with constant wave of monsters and jump through constant dangerous platforming over bottomless pits and spikes. Candles can and should be whipped so you can pick up hearts required to use weapon and money bags that raise your score. Even if you don't care about game scores, increasing rewards you with more lives. The movement of each enemy is relatively simple, but the layout of levels and knockback turns the difficulty dial way up. You might be tempted to take it slow because of that, but Castlevania IV is more about figuring out the rhythm of each stage segment than standing around waiting for when you think is safe. A very common misconception is that the stiff movement, limited whip range, jump physics and knockback range, all those mechanical details in the Castlevania games, are accidental or poorly implemented gameplay. At the same time, people praise the level of clunkiness that games like the Soul series and Monster Hunter series have. But just like in those newer games, all of the clunkiness in Castlevania was working exactly as intended. For example, your whip has limited range so that you are discouraged from ignoring the sub-weapons you pick up. And this is relevant because Super Castlevania IV throws a curveball at this principle. The whip is so useful that it could be all you need to reach the boss in a level. By consequence of this, Castlevania IV is considered one of the easiest, if not the easiest game to beat of the classic. That might as well be a good thing, because if you're inexperienced with Castlevania, you can start with a game that has style and atmosphere that aged incredibly well. Konami was at the top of their game back then. The developers knew how to push the hardware they worked with. If Rocket Knight shows off a lot of what the Sega Mega Drive could do, Super Castlevania IV really helps the Super Nintendo flex its graphical capabilities. Sometimes it tries too hard and you get some slowdown. The art and effects are some of the best in the system. This despite the game coming out very early in the console's life cycle. Music and sound don't fall behind. The SNES sound chip is very different to the Sega Genesis and Konami knew this. The music in Castlevania IV emulates more symphonic styles of music the best it can, with 16-bit style equivalent to strings, brass, piano, and organ instruments. Traditionally, Castlevania music is more energetic and catchy, but here it's a lot more atmospheric and haunting. It certainly has its share of catchy tracks though, which end up returning in future entries. Super is not my favorite classic Castlevania game, but I can see why so many people love it. It's very ambitious and experimental with its level design. Blocks of each level vary a lot in visuals. Often, they seem to break the standard flow to give the player a combination of unique spectacle and challenge, its style and substance. Super Castlevania IV gets a rating of 8 out of 10. While it's fairly easy by Castlevania standards, don't pick it up without expecting frustrating sections. These Castlevania games that came before Symphony of the Night are, no joke, close to Souls-like equivalent of 80s and 90s side-scrolling action. It's punishing, character movement is very meticulous, and later stages will make you stare at the game over screen a lot. You have unlimited continues for a reason, and just like Souls games, it will feel incredible for making past a boss or really difficult block of level. My biggest complaint affecting the rating is that I feel the game could have done with 2 or 3 levels cut from it. It starts overstaying its welcome when the game teases you with how close you are to the castle pinnacle, and the last few levels get pretty ridiculous with obstacles. Thanks for watching. I mentioned this game a few times in past videos, so it was about time it got its own mini review. Castle of Illusion for the Master System is not the Castle of Illusion that you know on the Genesis. The games share level themes and premise, but while the Genesis game was more fancy with some spectacle and otherwise very straightforward and traditional level design, the Master System game puts more emphasis on exploring, grabbing and throwing things. Mickey's butt attack is super important because you don't get marbles to shoot at enemies, and bouncing around is required to make progress. I'm surprised this comparison doesn't get brought up often when talking about this game, but it's in many ways similar to DuckTales on the NES, with all the treasure chests, coins and sweets to pick up, secret passages for more treasure, and Mickey's ground pound working pretty closely to Scrooge's cane. I guess we'll never know if his big, fat, juicy and lethal mouse butt can withstand spikes and thorns since this game doesn't feature any. It apparently can't withstand tiny green leaves though. For a while I used to think this game was developed by Capcom. Sega developed it themselves and somehow they pretty much nailed some of the Capcom feels with the controls and level design. Maybe the developers did a thorough research of the Disney games Capcom was releasing on the NES, or just their games in general, because you can't convince me this chocolate boss was inspired by Mega Man's Yellow Devil. Don't worry, this game is nowhere near as difficult as any Mega Man. This game is often rated as one of the very best on the Sega Master System. Replaying it made me notice it's a little more rough than I remember. Still, gotta agree with the public opinion here, this game is still pretty fun, it's short and sweet. The music is not exactly the best example of good PSG sound, often with high notes that get really distorted and irritating, but it's not bad. It probably doesn't compare to the Genesis game in that regard. A bigger issue with the game is the hitbox can get a bit spotty when trying to hit enemies mid-air. And in true Master System fashion, its final levels resort to some cheap design to compensate for how short and easy the game is. Like a part where guessing the wrong door takes you back a section, or baiting the player into going after a treasure that forces them to backtrack for no good reason. I can't be the only one who noticed this being a bit of a trend in Master System platforms, can I? Those issues don't really detract from the game helping make Sega's still niche 8-bit console more relevant for fans of old classic games. It's very much worth playing any way you can, especially if you enjoy platformers and could use something you can quickly burn through in about an hour of gaming. This game got a few sequels, but I haven't played them yet. Maybe they'll get their own reviews. Until then, thank you for watching and have a good one. Hey everyone, let me start by apologizing for the lack of an upload last week. I was and still am really sick. I couldn't even stand up for nearly the entire last Friday, so I wasn't gonna get any editing done. While at it, I also want to remind you this is a channel that actually uses its community tab, where I post important updates like my sick leave, so if you ever wonder why a video wasn't uploaded or why a video is late, that's where you'll find out. Anyway, today's game has its name thrown around a lot. I always see it being worshipped like one of the best vertical scrolling shooters ever made. I'm sure you've been in this situation before. You go play a game that gets so much high praise, there is no way it can live up to the hype. I wasn't expecting to be blown away, but at the very least I can see where people were coming from. Ikaruga is the successor to an arcade and Sega Saturn gem called Radiant Silvergun. And yeah, as I said, Ikaruga, that's how it's pronounced. It was developed by Treasure, which means you can expect the polish of a Treasure game. And you can also expect it to be super freaking hard. The game is 5 stages long, which even for an arcade shooter is very, very short. However, every stage feels very different to the next, with every boss testing your strategy and skills in a nearly completely different way. This means if you're not some kind of gaming god, you're probably gonna find a different seemingly impassable wall in every level in your first dozen playthroughs. What sets Ikaruga apart from the other games in the genre isn't just tiny text with pretentious nonsense that is impossible to read before it disappears from the screen, but the core mechanic of changing your ship's polarity. With the press of a button you can change between light and dark. This affects the color of your own shots. Enemy fire also comes in the two variations, so if your color matches that of the enemy, you absorb their shots and fill your energy bar. No, it's not a health bar, it's a gauge you spend to unleash powerful homing shots. You die in one hit in this game no matter what. This mechanic has to be mastered to be the game legit. Rather than simply dodging fire like any bullet hell, in Ikaruga the player is expected to approach each section of a level with focus on rhythm and strategy. There are no weapon upgrades or power-ups to get in this game. Aside from tampering with the game settings to make reaching the end credits really easy, there are no shortcuts. You get used to the polarity mechanic, learn the pattern and rhythm for each encounter, and try to reach the end without failing to kill bosses on time. With all that said, Ikaruga is not by any stretch of the imagination a shooter for newbies. If anyone tells you to start with this game to get into the genre, they either have very high expectations of you, or they really hate you. This is a shooter for fans of shooters who want to try something slightly different. On default difficulty, you're really expected to have excellent coordination and pay attention to your polarity, the pattern of enemy fire and your position so you don't end up colliding with anything. If you remember my Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth mini review, I expressed how I really didn't like that game's polarity mechanic. Yeah, well, it's way worse here, because I just didn't have the coordination to pay attention to so many things at once. Although, again, it really feels like in Ikaruga it's more of a matter of learning the rhythm of each boss, rather than reacting to everything on screen quickly. Still, like any shooter, this takes practice. You die a lot trying. You keep trying again, making a little bit further each time. If you're a fan of the genre, you're either gonna love or hate this game, because it doesn't exactly play like a standard shooter, and it lacks some of the addictive staples like all the power-ups. With the intended difficulty where enemies shoot back at you, you actually use your regular shots a lot less and the homing energy shots more, which makes Ikaruga play even less like a traditional shooter. The presentation and music style is rather unique, and the central mechanic has influenced a number of games in different genres since. This game is available on Dreamcast, GameCube, and every modern platform, except Mac. Thanks for watching and take care. If Ikaruga is a shooter for veterans of shooters looking for a challenge, then Tyrian targets the opposite audience. The game was published by Epic Mega Games in 1995, and yes, that was how Epic Games used to be called back then. Then the game received an updated version called Tyrian 2000 in 1999. Then the creator released a source code to the public, making the game completely free and open source in 2004. You can just search for OpenTyrian and download it for free to run on any modern operating systems like I did. This is running on my Windows 10 PC. There is a version on GOG that is also free, but don't get that version. That runs on DOSBox and is way clunkier to configure. The appeal of this criminally overlooked vertical shooter lies beyond its surface. The game features a shield and armor mechanic that prevents enemy fire from instantly killing you like the usual for the genre. As long as you watch out for your shield gauge and make sure not to deplete it completely, you can keep going. Once it's empty, you lose armor, which is your actual HP equivalent. Armor gets depleted very fast, but the game has a mercy system on top of that, where it might randomly send you a cargo for you to blow up and restore some of the armor. Never to its full capacity though. Your shield will regenerate over time if you cut back on your rapid fire. How quickly it regenerates depends on your ship's generator, which you can upgrade if you're playing on story mode. That's right, story mode. This game has 3 different modes of play. Well, 4, but the 4th one I was never able to unlock. Story mode is definitely the best for beginners because it gives you access to a menu between levels where you can spend money to change and upgrade ship parts or change ships entirely. Because in Tyrian, dying sends you back to the pre-stage menu, you don't actually lose the upgrades, so part of the strategy for beating a level you might be stuck on is experimenting with a different loadout of ship gear. And speaking as someone who hates the power-up reset mechanic from traditional shooters, it feels great to be allowed to simply bask in that feeling of becoming more and more of an unstoppable machine with no fear the game will punish your lack of skills by making itself even harder to beat. I never understood that. Don't think this means Tyrian has no challenge though. For one, position is still crucial. Not having to worry about losing upgrades means you as a novice can focus completely on just that. And the shield mechanic I mentioned isn't going to save you from being crushed to death in 1 or 2 seconds if a large ship or object collide with you. So you still need to learn patterns or memorize the more difficult parts of a stage. The game also features 6 difficulty modes. Easy and normal are totally doable by a novice, hard not so much. And the other 3 modes, which have to be unlocked through special battle combinations for whatever reason, are meant for experienced spaceship shooter fans. Story mode does in fact come with a lot of, mostly optional, text and lore dump, the majority of which you can read by collecting data cubes hidden in levels. Some of those are a lot of confusing nonsense that makes it hard to grasp the full context of what the heck is going on with the protagonist, but some is genuinely interesting and even funny. There are some branching paths for you to choose and hidden bonus levels that have some unique twists to them, including a few throwbacks to Space Invader clones and other early shooters. It's honestly shocking how much content the story mode has across its 4 episodes, and a rather emotional twist at the end if you bother reading the text. Arcade mode lets you skip all the story and focus on beating levels in a more traditional arcade shooter fashion. It also strips the game off the workshop, instead throwing the parts and weapons at you in form of collectible power-ups. And still, you don't lose them when dying, you still get sent back to the prep menu to try again, which sort of defeats the point of being in arcade mode. Well, go figure, it's still straightforward enough. Lastly, you have the 2-player mode, which comes with a unique mechanic of combining the 2 ships into one, where both players can still shoot, but one shoots ahead and controls the ship's positioning, while the other can aim at any direction around it when shooting. A feature that I couldn't make much use of is called Twiddle. It sounds like candy, but it's actually a mechanic that involves doing directional combinations to use a special move depending on what model of ship you're piloting. Just like a special move in a fighting game. Since positioning is important in a game like this, I found it a little hard to test. Still, very neat, never seen another shooter do this. The main problems with Tyrian are in some of its level design. Difficulty progression is basically non-existent. Ignoring ship upgrades, the levels themselves are easier or harder regardless of how early or late they are in the game. Sometimes the game will also rehash samey looking levels if they happen to take place in a planet you're revisiting, which is a tad disappointing. I really think the pros outweigh the cons with this game. Of all the shooters I've played, which admittedly are probably not that many, this is one I think anyone should at least try for half an hour or so. There is a lot of meat here and quite a few features that you don't see in just any shoot 'em up. The ship workshop adds a layer of player experimentation, the Edith cubes add quite a bit of world building, and really the game just looks and controls fine, with many options like gamepads, keyboard, mouse, or a combination of the three. The music might not please everyone, but who cares? Few levels later you're just gonna be hearing a lot of delicious explosion sounds while you shower enemies with firepower, almost like you're playing a Vampire Survivors clone. The game is freaking free with no strings attached. Go play OpenTyrian, it's in total nearly 4 hours of playtime from start to finish with the option of saving and quitting. I don't care how good or bad you are at shooters, just do it, dang it! Special thanks and shout out to the content creator and game developer Gris from Ancient DOS Games for making me aware this gem exists. Go check out his channel if you have any past interest in old DOS classics or Commodore 64 stuff. Thanks for watching and take care. Here's a mini review for a very mini-sized game. What Remains of Edith Finch is a walking simulator that got recommended to me a few times because I really liked playing The Vanishing of Ethan Carter. Walking simulator. You know, I think I like the term a lot less than I like the term Metroidvania. It sounds too reductive. It doesn't respect what the game designers were trying to create with these types of games. Although, I'm gonna be honest, I can't think of a different name for the genre. Sometimes trailers would call them narrative experiences, but really? Any game with a story that stays very present throughout can be called a narrative experience. You can't call that a genre. Oh, I know. How about exploration through narrative? No, that's more like a description rather than a genre, but you know what? I'm gonna go with that for a little while. If I describe the gameplay of games like this one as exploration through narrative, I really think you get the gist of it. There is no combat and pretty much no puzzle solving in the traditional sense. You play as a titular character who is visiting her old family house after many years since it was abandoned. The Finch family is a very peculiar one, as you find out. She was raised by a mom who was extremely secretive about the family's past. Edith is given a key by her mom after her passing, and this is the day she decides to go back and try and find out everything she could about the Finch family stories, or the truth behind those. The game pretty much guides you through where you have to go, not literally on rails, but it progresses very much like it is. If you played any point-and-click adventure game before, it's pretty much an evolution of that. Admittedly, there is less to click here, plus no inventory management, but that's only because they put so much detail on building every room that just looking around and sometimes closely at objects, photos, and books, you're already being told a lot about who lived there. That's one of the best parts about these so-called walking sims. The scenario and the locations themselves are designed to silently tell a story. All bedrooms in the house are sealed, and getting to them involves uncovering secret passages hidden around the house. I say uncover, but the game locks your progression. Those paths will be usable after you read the next story. Well, not so much read as experience. Every story is told to you in a different way, some more interactive than others, each one with a lot of surreal imaginative storytelling. The text is often written from the point of view of that member of the Finch family, but the facts are all masked behind the absurd fictional touches. Even the conclusion of what happened are left somewhat vague. This is done by design so the player has to figure out what really happened on their own. There is always some truth behind those crazy narrations and events, as the numerous gravestones outside the house show. The game is short, takes less than 3 hours to complete. It wouldn't be fair to spoil much more in a game that pretty much exists exclusively to tell you its story. My complaint is something that's very personal. In video games I require at least a few dozens of challenges serving as roadblocks for the narrative progression. Those challenges don't necessarily need to be difficult, but I gotta have that feeling the game is asking me, if you can't figure out how to make it past this, we're not letting you continue. What Remains of Edith Finch seriously lacks in that department. It's not lacking the interactivity that any video game needs to have, but I never felt like I was being asked to try anything. I have the freedom of looking around the rooms I step in, but the game is still holding my hand the entire time and giving me the illusion I have any sort of agency other than walking forward. Like the session where you control a cat. Sure, you can jump to a spot the game doesn't tell you to go, but if you do that, nothing happens, and it's a second-long detour at best. The jump itself is also semi-automated. This series of sections are actually the closest thing to such challenges in Edith Finch, by the way. It gets a little better towards the end of this particular sub-story, but I don't think the gameplay in the other stories are anywhere near this level. And that's kind of a problem. I don't expect this game to offer 3D platforming, RPG or first-person action, but I just miss being given full agency, then using that to clear an obstacle. Like I said, that's a very personal complaint. When judging a game, you have to consider what it was trying to do, rather than what you wanted it to do. There are merits in both, but one clearly should be weighing more over the other. My personal enjoyment wasn't great because I need more than a good narrative, no matter how good it is, to stay engaged in a video game. But the story and music direction are incredible. If you're an emotional person, expect to cry once or twice and think about where you are with your own family. The quirky, almost lemony snicket peculiarities will make sure the narrative doesn't get downright depressing. I'd say this game achieved nearly everything set out to do, and it's going to please every fan of the genre. As long as you know what to get into, there is no way you'll be disappointed. Thanks for watching and take care. SteamWorld Dig first came out in 2013 for the 3DS eShop as a $9 game. This should explain the overall simplicity of its gameplay loop. It's the first of the SteamWorld series of games, but didn't get a real sequel until SteamWorld Dig 2 in 2017. You can probably guess what the gameplay cycle is. That's right, you dig. You dig to make your path through very deep underground ruins, sometimes run into enemies, often mining ore, and even find doors leading to permanent upgrades. You know what that defines this game as, right? No, not Metroidvania. This is clearly a Metroid Dig Dugvania. You can even crush enemies on the rocks, just like in Dig Dug. If you don't know what Dig Dug is, stay confused, I'm not explaining. The ore you find is sold at the town hub in the surface. You can use the money to buy upgrades for the tools you unlock, restore your armor, or buy expendable tools like extra ladders and lanterns you can place anywhere. I never used any of that. Some expendable items cost orbs in addition to money, and those are very rare. It just seemed like a waste of limited resources. Some of the abilities you unlock cost water, and staying in the mines costs fuel. Fuel recharges itself every time you leave the mines, but it makes the first hour of the game really frustrating because it takes half a dozen upgrades before you stop running out of fuel constantly. The amount of cost of your resources can all be upgraded. You're gonna reach the end before max everything, just because the game is that short and easy. Combat is very bare bones, if not a little cumbersome. Ideally, you want to use the Steam Punch weapon after you unlock it rather than your pickaxe, but it costs water to use, and by the time you don't have to worry about running out, you'll already be close to finishing the game. Which means most enemies will be killed by your pickaxe, which is really tedious to use in combat. Thankfully, enemies can kill each other if they throw dynamites, bottles, or shoot projectiles. The mining and exploration starts off slow and simple. Could be either boring or relaxing depending on what kind of person you are. As you unlock the other sections of the mine, more hazards begin to appear and planning your escape and backtrack routes becomes a lot more important than just shooting off your brain to dig for gold. Near the end of the game, you have so much mobility with high jumps, double jumps, and protection against fall damage that those escape routes don't matter much anymore. But until then, think before digging. I guess this game has some kind of story, but I couldn't care too much about it, and believe me, I tried. It's a steampunk-themed post-apocalyptic setting where steam robots inherited the Earth, or something. I'm sure some of the other SteamWorld games go deeper into this. SteamWorld Dig, however, definitely goes very minimal. The main character is called Rusty, and I guess his uncle is gone, so he takes over his mining work, investigating the underground and helping the town prosper while he does it. The dialogue is very bland, but thankfully also very minimal. Not only because it isn't super interesting to read, but because every character speaks through gibberish noises. And it's bad enough that you have to hear this obnoxious thing when browsing the shop menu. Visually, the game looks fine considering it's a remaster of a 3DS game. There's definitely nothing wrong with it. I've never been a fan of this cheap paper puppet style of animation though. I will always prefer manual frame-by-frame animation in my video games. I don't know if I'd recommend buying this game when not on sale, but you could definitely play much worse for its price. If you're the kind of player who weighs the cost of a game on its length, then definitely wait for a discount, because you can easily see everything this has to offer in under 4 hours. SteamWorld Dig 2 is probably a lot better, but I've yet to play that one. Thanks for watching and take care. Mega Man Legends is a very unconventional Mega Man game that came out to PlayStation in 1997 and got a Nintendo 64 version in 2000. The Nintendo 64 version is just called Mega Man 64 and frankly looks, runs and controls a lot better at the cost of much worse sound quality. But I'm only gonna talk about Legends on the PlayStation. In Mega Man Legends, the world is covered by water, with only a few islands inhabited by humans who depend on ancient tech and energy resources salvaged by diggers. Diggers explore underground ruins infested by hostile machines called river bots and traps, usually doing the salvaging as a team. Mega Man Volnut and Roll Casket, the two protagonists, are a digger and a spotter respectively. Spotters are like remote support providers who map the ruins from outside and keep communicating with the digger during the treasure hunt. As such, the game does involve exploring a lot of ruins, opening treasure chests and shooting enemy machines. The treasures can contain money, artifacts that you can donate to a museum, or machine parts Roll can use to create secondary weapons and permanent upgrades for Mega Man. The money itself can be used to upgrade secondary weapons or buying items and other kinds of upgrades in junk shops like increasing your life gauge or stocking your energy canteens. You can also buy buster parts which function like the equipment you use in Japanese RPGs, affecting modifiers for your buster shots. It's essentially a 3D Metroid style game since all the ruins are connected and you do find yourself backtracking quite often to explore areas you couldn't reach before. The main barrier of entry in this game is a steep one. The game looks like a third-person platform but controls nothing like one. Maybe I haven't played that many Saturn and PlayStation games with a full 3D movement, but I'm almost sure there aren't that many games that control like Mega Man Legends does. It uses tank controls, but unlike in games like Resident Evil, you can't easily move forward or backwards while also changing directions. You have to turn first, then move. You can only do both while strafing, which is really hard to get used to. And the worst of all is this game is not compatible with DualShock. You have to use the D-pad to move around and the L1 or R1 buttons to strafe. There is a target lock-on feature that kinda helps. Volnut here might feel super sluggish to control, but once you get used to it, the game reveals itself to be stupidly easy. You're never asked to have great reflexes, and boosting your stats to make every boss die quickly is super simple. All you gotta do is boost your damage to the max using buster parts, then go for as much range as you can. That alone makes buster shots very broken. Secondary weapons are a great idea on paper, but the game is very poorly balanced. Two of the secondary weapons are not actual weapons, but utility tools like a vacuum that absorbs enemy loot from far away and a drill that destroys cracked walls. Most of the actual weapons are simply not worth the trouble when upgrading your buster already makes the enemy encounter very easy. The only two secondary weapons worth using are only available when you're getting close to the end of the game, and upgrading them costs so much zenny it takes several days just grinding to afford it. And well, the game itself can be completed in 1 or 2 play sessions if you know what you're doing. Legends has a very comfy, nostalgic 90s Saturday morning anime vibe going for it. If you were into anime from the 90s, you will feel right at home. Just mind the campy character script and very hit or miss voice acting. Sometimes it sounds terrible and cringe, other times it sounds like the voice actor was legitimately having a lot of fun with the character.
Oh, forget it! Who cares what this feeling is? It's all his fault! His fault! How dare he! I'll teach him not to mess with me or my kids!
I mean, it might take some money, but who cares? I'll use my ultimate digging machine, the Marl Wolf, to dig up the treasure myself! And I won't let any little blue boy get in my way either!
Like most plots in Japanese adventure games, it gets darker towards the end, but overall features a very easygoing and colorful setting. It drops some bombshells of world building in the last hour, which ties in with the sequel Mega Man Legends 2. While the game is incredibly short, there are a lot of side quests to complete, a few which you can fail permanently on. None of it is difficult to complete though. I think this game has a lot of charm that makes up for its near-complete absence of challenge. Exploring ruins for treasure is oddly relaxing, and the setting being so compact makes the city of catalogs and its NPCs become very familiar in a few hours of playtime. I really want to say it's an easy recommendation, but if you didn't get in contact with the PlayStation 1 era graphics while growing up, it might be hard to look past the sloppily put together textures with the scenes popping up all over the place, the humans who look like blocky mannequins, and above all, you need to put up with a weird control scheme. If you don't mind dealing with very muffled audio, you're better off playing the N64 version, but the controls will be a bit less of a struggle. Either way, the content itself is the same.
Not bad.
Thanks for watching and take care. Kamiko was the first game I ever bought on eShop for the Nintendo Switch, and I've been sitting on it until this year. I think it was the visuals looking a bit unappealing. Don't know about you, but this character's spread design seemed way overdone by 2017. Though to be fair, everything else looks good, and I really shouldn't have judged the game based on 5 minutes of playtime. Don't make the same mistake I had, because this game is a pick up and play, fast-paced fun designed perfectly for systems like the Switch or Steam Deck. It's also available on other platforms, but with each playthrough lasting less than an hour to see the ending credits, it really fits handheld devices nicely. You get some dialogue at the intro and before boss fights, but it's only a few lines of text. Just select one of the 3 characters and get ready to hack, slash, and shoot a lot of monsters. The game is designed so the player is able to clear levels really fast once they get used to it, and features a killing spree combo system that rewards you with more charges for special gauge the more you maintain the combo. This means if you're good at keeping your combo going, you will be able to use your charge attack more often without depleting your gauge. Each character feels different from the other, although the basic movement and button layout is the same. You have a dash button and an attack button. Attacking with the close range characters is affected by momentum of your dash, which is useful for going from one enemy to another quickly. You could also charge the attack button to unleash each character's special move. There are 3 characters to choose from, all 3 being Miku, or Shrine Maiden, who gets summoned to the world of the dead to become the Kamiko to unseal gates connecting that world to the human world and vanquish the demons who had them sealed. Yamato is the easiest one for beginners. Her sword has good range without affecting her speed. Her attacks are the closest to what the average player would expect from a top-down hack and slash in terms of speed and pattern. Her charge attack is a spinning move. Uzume fights with bow and arrows. She can dash like the others, but her attack makes you vulnerable, so positioning is very important. The danger of being overwhelmed by mobs of monsters gets mitigated by her attack combination shooting more arrows in a cone formation. Her charge attack is a homing shot that spreads to multiple targets. Hinome uses a short sword and a shield. Her sword has a very short reach, and her first attack involves throwing her shield like a boomerang. The shield throw doesn't have the range of Uzume's arrows, and her sword doesn't have the range of Yamato's sword. I'm sure you can guess from that she's by far the hardest character to master. The trick to her is to always be moving. The shield will strike everything in its way back to her, and that's incredibly useful for achieving fast clear times and keeping the combo meter up. Her charge attack is a big circular shield throw. The gameplay cycle involves more than just killing hordes of enemies to some good chiptune music. The goal is to unseal 4 portals, represented by 4 torii spread in 4 corners of each level to unlock the final gate that takes you to the boss. That's right, those red wooden portal looking things you see leading to shrines in Japanese anime and game settings are called torii, or torii gates. You're now 1% smarter than you were before knowing this. Don't confuse torii with torii, by the way, you will be publicly humiliated if you do. And while at it, I should also tell you Kamiko basically means little goddess. There, 2% smarter. You're welcome. Getting to the gates involves solving a series of small puzzles to unlock paths and warp tiles, all while enemies continue to respawn. Unsealing a gate costs some of your special gauge. That's why you're supposed to be constantly killing enemies as you move along. The puzzles aren't hard to figure out, but they add more to the experience than simply running around and killing things. Solving them is usually a matter of memorizing locations of important objects you have to interact with and being good at avoiding damage when you're unable to fight back. The game itself is moderately difficult. You can make things easier on yourself by finding and collecting power-ups that increase your life and spatial gauges. It's very much a speedrun-oriented game with a mastery of every little mechanic rewarding you with the ability to always keep going for a short clear time. The gates will drain you of your gauge, which you feel by killing enemies, which also allows you to use your special attacks, and as long as you keep your combo high, you will be able to use those moves more often, and still have enough to unseal more gates. But to keep your combo high, you need to be quick at reaching the next group of enemies. I love when designers pull interconnected mechanics that harmonize with the level design perfectly like this, without punishing the player too hard for not playing to the beat right away. Kamiko is very cheap and you could definitely do much worse for $5. It's only going to last you an evening or afternoon of gaming, but a very polished one that I believe will be worth your time and money. An easy recommendation for anyone. Thanks for watching and take care. The Master System has nostalgic value to me, so it's natural for me to try and dig deeper into its library. Past the same dozen games that are always at the top 10 list to find some type of overlooked game. You thought I was gonna say hidden gems, didn't you? Well, I guess I just said it. Asterix is a video game based on a French comic book franchise that also had countless feature-length animated movies. They were very popular in my country, Brazil, for nearly 3 decades, so it makes sense that this game would get an official release over here. Was it worth it though? A lot of people seem to say it was. This game gets recommended by Master System fans online often, and now that I played all the way to the credits, I feel confused. The plot is, as you may suspect, very simple. The Romans have kidnapped panoramic Getafix? Man, the American localization is not great. Anyway, he's the wise druid of Asterix village, and since they rely on his potions to defend themselves from Roman attacks, he needs to be rescued. The game starts off as a fine platformer. It does a job of teaching you what you're expected to do as Asterix or Obelix for the rest of the game, even if you don't read the manual that comes with the package. It's a very slow side-scroller with hidden secrets rewarding you with extra lives or health upgrades that carry over through the rest of the game. It's split into areas that are split into 3 rounds each. That's right, this is a Mario Metroidvania. After the first couple levels, you get to choose between Asterix or Obelix before a round, and depending on who you choose, the path to the end of the level changes. Some levels will change their layout completely based on the character, while others will stay the same, but paths you couldn't cross as one character can be crossed with the other, and vice versa. That's probably the most interesting feature of the game. I don't get the lasting appeal of the game though. The level design falls apart starting from round 31. Everything looks incredibly bland and the graphics of the areas don't match the quality and effort put into the character and enemy pixel art. The Master System is capable of more than this. The game starts resorting to all sorts of cheap tricks to pad your playthrough. The killer or soft lock dead ends you have no way to foresee, Romans you can't kill for no reason, and intentionally confusing paths to the objectives. The levels are also completely ruined by some really tedious design decisions, like all the sections were supposed to slowly throw potions into lava to reach another platform while dealing with the game's extremely finicky hitboxes and slippery movement. Or these atrocious sections where you have to be ultra precise with the momentum and timing of your throws to open a path through blocks. I can't tell if they meant for the explosion range of the bombs to be this ridiculously tiny on purpose to make the player waste their time, or if they just didn't test anything properly. Sometimes you also fail some basic jumps, because the change in momentum is very hard to notice until you attempt a long jump. I would never call this game challenging, at least not in a good way. It's just incredibly unpolished and poorly designed. And the saddest part is that this was actually developed by Sega themselves. What exactly happened here then? I'm starting to think the Master System is just cursed. There might not be any overlooked gem to be found after all. But I guess I continue to search for some. Whatever the case, this ain't it. Sorry to everyone who really thinks this is a decent game, I just don't see it. I really can't think of many good things to say about this game, other than the characters themselves looking very detailed and exactly how I imagined them in a 8 or 16-bit video game, and the secrets adding some replay value, but I think playing this game once is bad enough. Even the music isn't good, with very short repetitive loops that just turn into background noise. If you need some extra fix with your gaming, there are a lot of alternatives out there. I'm sure one of them will offer a better value. Thank you for watching and take care. This is Gris, on the Nintendo Switch, and I just want to say, it's hard to think about what to talk about when it comes to puzzle games, and this is a very short game with literally no dialogue or any text that isn't just for the menus or brief instructions for the character's abilities. I'm giving this game the mini review treatment not because it doesn't deserve more, but because I don't always have a lot of thoughts to share about the game I played. Besides, this is very much a game you can understand just by watching gameplay for a few seconds. Gris is a puzzle platformer. It features a single connected large map, split into different areas where you can explore to collect stars and unlock upgrades, which give you new abilities to solve different types of puzzles and interact with the environment. Yep. One big single map with unlockable abilities, you know what that means. It gets to be labeled a puzzle Metroidvania because that's how people name genres these days. The puzzle nature means some players will take longer than the others to figure out what to do to move forward, or find some of the secret collectibles that unlock the true ending. Still, the game has a very good flow and it's designed so the players can figure out what to do with the abilities they have, or their observation skills sooner or later. I'm a very slow learner and absent-minded, so when I stream this game, people from the chat ended up pointing some of the things out before me. That doesn't mean it's difficult, but some people will be better trained for these type of skills than others, that's just how it is. So if you think you're bad at puzzles, don't get discouraged. The game does a good job guiding you with each new ability. You learn how to use it, what it does, followed by a puzzle that focuses on that ability, before it's assumed you're getting comfortable enough to make it through the puzzles that require all the abilities you unlocked. It's very intuitive. The visuals play an important role in Gris. You begin watching Gris lose her voice while she's trying to sing, falling into a world where everything is in grayscale. But the progress leads to unlocking primary colors. Each extra color makes the details in the background pop more and more, and the animation of the main character is very smooth. It's a good looking game which tells its story and journey through visuals. It's also very abstract, like a dream world, which makes sense when you find out what the theme of Gris' journey is. I don't want to spoil what it is if you don't already know, because understanding what this is a puzzle itself. The answer is laid completely bare if you unlock the true ending. Unfortunately, I had the theme spoiled for me before I played. It ruined the mystery, but not the whole experience, and definitely didn't ruin the ambience. At times you're just calmly exploring and trying to think, other times you're dominated by the sense of wonder by what you're seeing, only for all that to be suddenly broken by some nightmare-like manifestation, like a storm before another calm. And all of this is accompanied by beautiful music that harmonizes with the visuals. It turns the full combination of puzzles and abstract colorful environments into an emotional journey, even while you still don't understand what's happening. Again, this is not an action game. There are maybe 2 instances where you ask to hurry up, and they're not long sections. For the entire rest of the game, you're allowed to take your time. This is an experience that can be described as controlling a character in a frame of painting that somehow contains a puzzle game inside of it. If that was the intention of Nomada Studio, then this was a big success. I can't think of any bad things to say about this, really. It's a rare case in this channel where I pick up and beat a game that feels like it accomplished pretty much everything it was set out to do. Puzzle platformers are not my favorite genre, and I probably wouldn't be very interested in replaying this if asked, but as a reviewer, I like to think I can sometimes tell how good a game is, regardless of my personal enjoyment. If Chained Echoes is a 9 out of 10 game, Gris is certainly a 10. And the only players I cannot recommend this to are people with bad taste in video games. So go and play Gris. It's on every major gaming platform. Thanks for watching and take care.